I don't understand. How could they?
No.
No, I won't go. Where is the money, Mom? I don't know what you're talking about. The money from the attic. You said you moved it. I didn't say anything like that. Leave me alone.
The trust stipulates you are the sole beneficiary.
This can't be right. You said you'd take care of us.
I knew something was wrong the moment Lauren drove past the restaurant and turned beneath a stone sign that read, Independent and Assisted Living. I stared at her. Why are we here? She smiled as if she'd brought me somewhere for a manicure. We're just looking, Teresa. There's no reason to make this emotional. Then I noticed the leather folder resting beside her. A paper had slipped halfway out. My address was printed across the top. Below it were 3 words that made my stomach tighten: estimated property value. Lauren thought she was taking a 69-year-old widow on a nursing home tour. What she didn't know was that I already had an appointment with the lawyer who had structured my late husband's estate. And before this was over, Lauren would learn exactly whose future she had been planning. If you were sitting in my seat, would you walk inside or demand to be taken home? Tell me in the comments. And while you're there, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If stories about family dignity and the choices we sometimes have to fight to keep mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. I'd truly love to have you here for the rest of my story. 6 months before Lauren drove me beneath that stone sign, I would have laughed if anyone had suggested my daughter-in-law was trying to take control of my life. Back then, I still believed concern was simply concern. My name is Teresa Reynolds. I was 69 years old, and I had been a widow for 3 years. My husband William died after 44 years of marriage, and even after all that time there were mornings when I woke expecting to hear him downstairs making coffee. William had always risen before me. He would open the blinds, turn on the little radio beside the refrigerator, and complain that I bought coffee that was too expensive while pouring himself a second cup. After he died, silence became the loudest thing in my house. People assumed loneliness would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The hardest part was learning that grief could make perfectly capable people look fragile to everyone around them. For the first few months, Daniel called every morning. Mom, you okay? I was okay yesterday. That wasn't my question. I'd smile despite myself. Yes, sweetheart. I'm okay. Daniel was my only child. At 43, he worked as an operations manager for a regional construction supply company. I was hard-working, charming when he wanted to be, and still capable of giving me the same crooked grin he'd worn at 14 whenever he knew I had caught him doing something foolish. His wife Lauren was different. Lauren was organized in a way that made ordinary organization look lazy. She planned vacations with spreadsheets. She made restaurant reservations 3 weeks ahead. Her pantry containers had labels facing forward. For years I admired that about her. After William died, Lauren became even more attentive. She brought food. She helped sort condolence cards. She sat beside me when people came to collect some of William's clothes for donation. When I cried, she didn't tell me to stop. That mattered to me. So when her concern began changing, I didn't recognize it immediately. I still drove myself wherever I needed to go. I paid my own bills, handled my banking, scheduled my appointments, cooked my meals, and maintained the house. Twice a week, I volunteered at a literacy program in Raleigh, working mostly with adults who wanted help improving their reading. Tuesday and Thursday mornings gave my week structure. I had friends. I had church. I had Maggie Sullivan, who had known me since we were young teachers, trying to survive our first classrooms. I wasn't pretending to be 25. My knees reminded me every morning that I wasn't. But there was a difference between aging and being incapable. Lauren seemed to forget that difference. The first comment came after dinner at their house one evening. It was nearly 9 when I picked up my purse. Lauren looked toward the window. Are you sure you should drive home this late? I laughed. Lauren, it's 9 o'clock, not midnight. I know, I just worry about your night vision. My night vision is fine. Daniel was rinsing dishes. Mom could drive that route blindfolded. That's not funny, Lauren said. Something in her tone made both of us look at her. She smiled quickly. I just mean she's alone now. We should be more careful. I kissed Daniel goodbye and drove home without thinking much about it. 2 weeks later, we were having lunch when I told them about Maggie accidentally attending the wrong yoga class. Halfway through the story, Lauren interrupted. You told us this already. I stopped. Did I last weekend? Daniel shrugged. I don't remember hearing it. You did, Lauren insisted. I laughed. Well, congratulations, you're getting the director's cut. Daniel laughed too. Lauren didn't. She watched me for a second longer than necessary. That look stayed with me. It wasn't annoyance. It was assessment. A month later, I misplaced my phone while Lauren was visiting. I checked the kitchen counter, my purse, and the table beside my chair. Lauren immediately stood. When did you last have it? I don't know. That's why I'm looking. Do you lose things often? I looked at her. Lauren. I'm looking for a phone, not wandering through downtown Raleigh in my nightgown. She gave a little laugh. I didn't mean anything. We found it 5 minutes later. It was charging in my bedroom. I'd plugged it in myself and forgotten. An ordinary mistake. At least that's what I thought. The next Sunday, Daniel called. Mom, Lauren said you couldn't find your phone. I was standing in my kitchen slicing strawberries. I found it. I know. She was just worried. I put the knife down. Daniel, have you ever lost your phone? Of course. Should I start researching facilities for you? He laughed. Point taken. I thought that would end it. Instead, the questions multiplied. Lauren began offering to do things I had never asked her to do. She offered to organize my medications. I took one prescription. She offered to set up automatic grocery deliveries. I enjoyed going to the grocery store. She offered to take over scheduling my lawn service. I had used the same man for 8 years. One afternoon, she stood at the bottom of my staircase while I carried a basket of folded towels upstairs. Teresa, you really shouldn't be doing that alone. I stopped halfway. Doing what? Carrying things on stairs. It's towels. You could fall. So could you. I'm 40, and therefore protected by gravity. She sighed. You know what I mean. Actually, I was beginning not to. What bothered me most was that she increasingly made these comments in front of Daniel. If I forgot a word, Lauren noticed. If I rubbed my knee, Lauren noticed. If I said I was tired, Lauren noticed. Each thing was harmless by itself. Together they began forming a picture of me that I did not recognize. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting on my back porch after lunch. Daniel was looking across the yard toward the maple William had planted when Daniel was 10. Lauren glanced toward the roof. This place must be a lot to maintain. It isn't bad. You have 4 bedrooms. I know, I've counted them. Daniel smiled. Lauren continued. And that huge yard. I like my yard. I'm just saying, for one person. There it was again. One person. After William died, people constantly reminded me that I was one person now. One dinner plate, one ticket, one name on invitations. One person in a house built for a family. I had spent 3 years learning that being one person did not mean being half a life. I manage fine, I said. Lauren touched my arm. I know you do now. Now. One small word. But I heard the future hidden inside it. Daniel must have heard something too. Lauren, Mom's fine. I didn't say she wasn't. You kind of did. She leaned back. I think families should discuss these things before there's a crisis. That's all. What things? I asked. Options. For what? She hesitated. Eventually downsizing. Maybe a condo. Somewhere without stairs. Something easier. I have no intention of moving. You don't have to decide today. I wasn't aware I had been asked to decide anything. The conversation died there. Or I thought it did. A few weeks later, Lauren came over while Daniel was working. We had coffee in my kitchen. She complimented the new curtains. We talked about a neighbor. Then, as casually as someone asking about the weather, she said, Do you know what this house is worth now? I looked across the table. No. That wasn't entirely true. A real estate agent who had sold a nearby property had given me a rough estimate the previous year. Lauren stirred her coffee. Property values around here have gone crazy, so I've heard. You and William bought this place a long time ago, didn't you? 37 years ago. And you paid off the mortgage. I didn't answer immediately. Lauren looked up. What? That's a strange question. She smiled. I'm just curious. About my mortgage, I was thinking about how lucky you are. Most people your age don't have that kind of security. My age again. Security. The house. Those subjects were beginning to appear together too often. I changed the conversation. But after Lauren left, I remained at the kitchen table. The afternoon sun fell across the hardwood floor William and I had chosen together 20 years earlier. I looked around at the room. The dent beside the pantry where Daniel had crashed a toy truck when he was 6. The pencil marks inside the hallway closet where William had measured Daniel's height every birthday. The window over the sink, where I had stood watching my husband shovel snow during the rare North Carolina storms that made him behave like a man preparing for the Arctic. To Lauren, perhaps it was simply a large house occupied by one aging woman. To me, it was the physical map of my life. And suddenly my daughter-in-law seemed very interested in what that map was worth. That evening Daniel called. We spoke about nothing important for several minutes. Then before hanging up he said, "Mom, yes, Lauren mentioned you two talked about the house." I straightened. Did she? She worries about you, so everyone keeps telling me. He was quiet. I could hear something underneath his silence. Daniel, is there something you want to ask me? No. Then why are we discussing my house? Another pause. I just think Lauren means well. I looked toward the empty chair across from me, the chair William had occupied for decades. Meaning well and knowing what's best for someone aren't always the same thing. I know. But his voice lacked conviction. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window for a long time. For months I had treated Lauren's comments as irritating expressions of concern. That night something changed. I began replaying them. The night driving, the stairs, the phone, the repeated story, the size of the house, the mortgage, my age. Individually, they meant almost nothing. Together, they sounded different. They sounded like questions someone might ask before making a decision. The only problem was that the decision concerned my life, and no one had bothered to ask me. 3 days later, Daniel and Lauren came for Sunday dinner. Everything seemed normal until Lauren looked around my dining room and said almost casually, "Teresa, have you ever thought about what you'd get if you sold this place?" Daniel stopped chewing. I noticed. And in that instant, I understood something that frightened me more than Lauren's question. My son already knew she was going to ask it. Daniel's silence told me more than Lauren's question did. He kept his eyes on his plate, cutting a piece of roast chicken that did not need cutting. Lauren, meanwhile, sat across from me with the pleasant expression of a woman discussing paint colors. "Have I thought about selling?" I repeated. "Just generally," she said. "The market around here is incredible. I'm aware. You could probably get more than you think." Daniel finally looked up. "Lauren, what I'm not saying she should sell tomorrow." "No one said anything about selling tomorrow," I replied. "Or next year. Or at all." Lauren lifted both hands slightly. "I was only asking." That phrase was becoming one of her favorites. Only asking. Only worrying. Only trying to help. Yet somehow every harmless question ended at the same destination. My house. I had lived there for 37 years. When William and I bought it, the area outside Raleigh looked nothing like it did now. There had been long stretches of trees between neighborhoods, small family-owned stores, and enough open land that William used to joke we were moving halfway to Virginia. We paid less for the entire property than some people now paid for a kitchen renovation. The house wasn't impressive then. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, red brick, an attached garage, and a backyard large enough for Daniel to spend most of his childhood destroying patches of grass. William loved it immediately. I worried about the mortgage. He stood in the empty living room during our first showing, spread his arms, and said, "Teresa, I can already see Christmas here." That was William. He could see a memory before it happened. And he had been right. There had been 37 Christmas mornings in that house. Daniel had learned to ride his bicycle on the driveway. He had broken his wrist falling from the maple tree in the backyard after I explicitly told him not to climb it. We hosted graduation parties, Thanksgiving dinners, retirement celebrations, and one disastrous anniversary dinner when William attempted to cook lobster and nearly set a dish towel on fire. Years later, after Daniel moved out, William and I talked about downsizing. We even visited two smaller homes. But every time we returned, William would stand in the kitchen and say, "This still feels like us." So we stayed. We paid off the mortgage years before he retired. Then Raleigh expanded. New subdivisions appeared. A shopping center opened several miles away. Road improvements brought more traffic. Businesses moved closer. Property that once seemed ordinary became valuable. The year before Lauren started asking questions, a real estate agent named Susan Parker had knocked on my door. She had just sold a property nearby and wondered whether I had considered listing mine. "I'm not selling," I told her. "I understand. But if you ever change your mind, call me." Before leaving, she gave me a rough estimate. Depending on zoning market conditions and what a buyer intended to do with the land, she believed my property could bring around $1.1 million. I told Maggie about it over lunch. Then I put Susan's card in a drawer and forgot about it. I never told Lauren. I couldn't remember whether I had mentioned the estimate to Daniel. That uncertainty began bothering me after Sunday dinner, because Lauren's questions became more specific. A week later, she came over with Daniel to help me move an old bookcase from the guest room. Afterward, while Daniel carried boxes downstairs, Lauren wandered toward the front window. "Your property taxes must have increased a lot." "They have. How much are they now?" I looked at her. Why, she laughed. "You always think I'm interrogating you, because you keep asking questions that sound like an interrogation. I'm interested in real estate." "Since when?" She smiled but didn't answer. Another afternoon, she asked whether my homeowner's insurance had become expensive. Then she asked how much land came with the house. Then whether William had left the deed solely in my name. That question stopped me. We were standing in my kitchen. Lauren had been telling me about a friend who had inherited her mother's condominium. Then she said, "Did William put this house directly in your name when he died?" I set my coffee cup down. "Why would you need to know that I don't need to?" "Then why ask Teresa families talk about estate planning? Do they? Responsible families do." I stared at her. There was something almost rehearsed about the answer. "William and I were responsible," I said. "We handled our affairs." "I know. I'm not criticizing you." "Good." She changed the subject. But I noticed something. Lauren hadn't gotten an answer, and she hadn't liked that. That evening I called Daniel. "Is everything all right between you and Lauren?" He sounded surprised. "Yeah." "Why?" "She's been asking a lot of questions about my finances." "What kind of questions?" "My mortgage, taxes, insurance, the deed." He sighed. "Mom, she's probably just thinking ahead to what you know, your future. My future seems to occupy a remarkable amount of her present. Don't make this into something. I'm not making it into anything. I'm asking you." Daniel became quiet. I had spent enough years as an elementary school principal to recognize the silence of someone choosing words carefully. Finally, he said, "Lauren thinks you might eventually be happier somewhere smaller." "Lauren doesn't live here, I know. Do you think I should move?" "No. Not now." Again. That word, now. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. I waited. Then I asked the question that had been forming for weeks. "Daniel, do you need money?" His response came too quickly. "No." "Are you sure, Mom? That's not an answer. We're fine." Something tightened inside me. I knew my son. Daniel had always been terrible at lying directly to me. As a teenager, he could hide things by omission. He could change subjects. He could become offended that I had asked. But a clean lie made his voice rise slightly. It had just risen. I decided not to push. 2 weeks later, Daniel stopped by alone. We sat on the back porch with iced tea. For almost an hour, he seemed like the son I knew. We talked about work, basketball, Maggie's newest attempt to convince me to take a cruise. Then Daniel looked across the yard. "Mom, can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" "That depends entirely on the question." He smiled. Then the smile disappeared. "If you ever did sell this place, what would you do with the money?" There it was. Not Lauren this time. My son. I set my glass down. Why are you asking? No reason. Daniel, I'm curious. Your wife has spent months being curious about my house. Now you are too. He rubbed his hands together. I just mean you'd have a lot of options. I already have options. You know what I mean. No, actually, I don't. He looked uncomfortable. You could buy something smaller. Invest the rest. Travel. I can travel now. I know. Then why does everyone need me to sell my home before I can enjoy my life? No one needs you to sell. The word need caught my attention. I looked directly at him. Are you in financial trouble? He shook his head. We're okay. That's not what I asked. Mom, please. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, if you need help, tell me the truth. Don't circle around my property hoping I'll guess. His face changed. For 1 second, I thought he was going to tell me something. Then he stood. I have to go. Daniel, we're fine. He kissed my cheek and left. I watched his truck disappear down the driveway. That night, I walked through the house differently. For the first time, I tried to see it through Lauren's eyes. Not as the place where Daniel had grown up. Not as the home William and I built. As numbers. No mortgage. Valuable land. A widowed owner approaching 70. More bedrooms than she needed. More equity than she could possibly spend. And an only son. The thought made me ashamed because it felt ugly. I told myself I was becoming suspicious. Then something happened that made suspicion much harder to dismiss. The following Saturday, Daniel and Lauren invited me to dinner. I arrived early. Daniel was outside speaking with a neighbor, so Lauren let me in and returned to the kitchen. A few minutes later, Daniel came through the back door. I was in the hallway when I heard Lauren say his name sharply. I stopped. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then I heard my own name. Your mother isn't even considering it. Daniel lowered his voice. I couldn't make out his response. Lauren answered more forcefully. You keep saying that, Daniel, but we can't keep waiting forever. My hand tightened around my purse. Daniel said something else. Then Lauren replied, and what happens if we run out of time? I stepped backward before either of them could see me. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. Waiting. Time. My mother. I walked deliberately toward the living room and called out, I'm here! Their conversation stopped instantly. Lauren appeared first. Her expression changed so quickly it almost impressed me. Teresa. I didn't hear you come in. I've only been here a minute. Daniel entered behind her. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Dinner was painfully normal. Lauren talked about a new restaurant. Daniel complained about work. I smiled when appropriate. But inside, one sentence repeated itself. We can't keep waiting forever. Waiting for what? For me to agree to sell, for me to move, or for something else? On the drive home, I remembered Daniel asking what I would do with the money. I remembered Lauren asking whether the mortgage was paid. I remembered her question about the deed. And then I remembered something William once told Daniel during an argument years earlier. Daniel had been considering a risky investment and complained that his father was too cautious. William had looked at him and said, never spend money in your head before it belongs to you. At the time, I thought he was talking about a business deal. Sitting at a red light that night, I suddenly wondered whether Daniel had forgotten that lesson. Because for the first time in my life, I had the unsettling feeling that my son and daughter-in-law weren't simply thinking about my future. They were calculating theirs around it. And I still didn't know how desperate they had become. For the next 2 weeks, I told myself I had misunderstood what I heard. That was easier than accepting the alternative. Daniel was my only son. I had spent 43 years learning the difference between his confidence and his fear, between the way he smiled when he was genuinely happy and the way he smiled when he wanted me to stop asking questions. And lately I was seeing that second smile far too often. He began canceling plans. One Tuesday he was supposed to come over and replace the weather stripping around my back door, not because I couldn't call someone to do it, but because Daniel had insisted. At 4 that afternoon he texted, Sorry, Mom. Work emergency. Rain check. The following Sunday he and Lauren canceled dinner. Then Daniel missed a lunch we had planned near my literacy program. Each time there was an explanation. Work, traffic, a meeting, a contractor, nothing alarming by itself. But when we did spend time together, his phone rarely left his hand. At dinner one evening, it rang 3 times. The third time, Daniel looked at the screen and stood immediately. Sorry, I need to take this. He stepped outside. I watched him through the window. He wasn't speaking like a man handling an ordinary work call. One hand pressed against his forehead. He paced. Lauren noticed me watching. It's been a stressful quarter. At his company? She hesitated. Yes. Mostly. Mostly. When Daniel came back, I asked whether everything was all right. Fine. I looked at him. He sighed. Mom, please don't give me the principal stare. I retired from being a principal. The stare came with me. Normally, that would have made him laugh. It didn't. Lauren reached for her wine. Can we have one dinner without discussing problems? Her tone was sharper than the question required. Daniel looked at her. I looked at both of them. No one spoke. A week later, I finally learned what they had been hiding. Daniel came to my house alone on a Saturday morning. I was outside watering the hydrangeas when his truck pulled into the driveway. He got out wearing jeans and an old gray sweatshirt. Coffee, I asked. Please. That one word told me this wasn't a social visit. We sat at the kitchen table. Daniel wrapped both hands around his mug but didn't drink. I waited. Years of working with children had taught me that silence was sometimes more useful than questions. Finally, he said, you asked me if Lauren and I were having money problems. I remember. I should have answered you honestly. My stomach tightened. How bad? He looked down. Not catastrophic. Daniel, I mean it. We're not losing our house. That wasn't what I asked. He exhaled slowly. Then he told me. About 18 months earlier, Daniel and Lauren had invested in a rental property with another couple, Brian and Kelly Mercer. The idea sounded simple. They would buy an older duplex in a neighborhood undergoing redevelopment, renovate it, increase the rental income, then refinance once the improvements raised the property value. Daniel had put in savings. Lauren had put in more. Brian and Kelly contributed capital as well. On paper, it looked manageable. Then they opened the walls. Electrical problems, water damage, old plumbing, a foundation issue no one had anticipated. Every repair exposed another repair. The contractor originally hired for the project left halfway through after a dispute over payments. The replacement contractor cost more. Permits took longer than expected. The building remained partially vacant. Their renovation budget didn't merely increase, it nearly doubled. How much did you put into this? I asked. Daniel rubbed his jaw. More than we planned. How much, Mom? If you want to tell me the truth, tell me the truth. He looked away. A lot of our savings. I felt a wave of frustration. Why didn't you tell your father about this before he died? The deal happened after Dad died. Of course. For a moment, grief and irritation collided inside me. William would have asked questions Daniel didn't want to answer. That was probably why my son had always described his father as overly cautious. What happens now? I asked. Our partners want out. Can you buy them out? Not easily. And the loan. His expression told me that was the real problem. We have a refinancing deadline coming up. How soon? A few months. And if you can't refinance, we'll have to sell. That sounds unpleasant, but not impossible. At a loss. How large we don't know yet. I sat back. Daniel stared into his coffee. For the first time, I understood the tension I had been seeing. The canceled dinners, the phone calls, Lauren's irritability. But another question remained. What does any of this have to do with my house? His head came up. Nothing. Are you sure? Yes. Then why has Lauren spent months asking about its value? She worries about you. Daniel stopped saying that as if it answers every question. His mouth tightened. I didn't come here to fight, neither did I. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. You are my son. If you're scared, you can tell me you're scared. His eyes softened. I am. There it was. Finally. Truth. My anger eased. For a moment, all I saw was my child. not a 43-year-old man with an investment problem. My boy, I'm sorry, I said. He nodded. We'll figure it out. I squeezed his hand. I believe you will. He looked at me then, and I saw something pass across his face. Expectation, perhaps. It disappeared so quickly I couldn't be sure. I could have offered money. I had savings. William and I had lived carefully. But Daniel hadn't asked, and something inside me warned against volunteering, so I didn't. When Daniel left, he hugged me tightly. That evening, Lauren called. Daniel told me he talked to you. He did. I hope you're not worried. Of course I'm worried. He's my son. We'll manage. I hope so. Silence. Then Lauren said, It's just frustrating when you know there are solutions. I waited. What solutions? Oh, nothing. I'm just stressed. She changed the subject. But after that conversation, her concern about my living situation accelerated. 3 days later, she called while I was making breakfast. Have you thought about hiring someone for the yard? I already have someone. I mean, more regular help. I don't need more regular help. The property is a lot. There it was. Again. The following week, she brought up property taxes, then maintenance, then my stairs, then loneliness. I finally asked Lauren, why are you suddenly so interested in making my life easier? She laughed. Is that a crime? No. But you're solving problems I don't have. You live alone in a 4-bedroom house. I know where I live. Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about repairs? I don't worry about repairs. What about falling? I haven't fallen. What if you do? What if you do, Teresa? No, really. You're 40. Are you planning your entire life around things that haven't happened yet? Her voice softened. I just think there are communities now that aren't like the old nursing homes people imagine. I stopped wiping the counter. Communities, yes. Beautiful places. Independent living. Activities. Restaurants. Transportation. I have a house, activities, restaurants, and a car. You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. She became quiet. Then she said, You shouldn't dismiss something before learning about it. And you shouldn't plan something for me before I ask. She left 20 minutes later. I thought I had made myself clear. The next afternoon, I returned from volunteering and found a glossy brochure on my kitchen counter. Lauren had stopped by earlier to return a casserole dish. The brochure showed smiling, silver-haired couples walking through landscaped gardens. Across the front were the words, Live well, live simply, live your next chapter. I stared at it. Then I laughed once, though nothing was funny. I opened it. There were photographs of apartments, dining rooms, fitness classes, libraries. It looked lovely. That wasn't the point. I didn't want to move. I hadn't asked to move. I was still living the life I had chosen. I turned another page. Lauren had folded the corner. The section described financial planning for senior living. A sentence had been circled in blue ink. Unlock the value of your current home to fund the lifestyle and care you deserve. I knew Lauren's handwriting. I knew the blue pens she always carried in her purse. I stood alone in my kitchen with that brochure in my hands, and the final piece slid into place. Daniel and Lauren had a financial problem. They needed options. I owned a valuable house without a mortgage. And suddenly Lauren had decided I was too old to need it. The realization hurt more than I expected, because I could understand desperation. I could even understand Daniel being ashamed to ask for help. What I couldn't understand was why my daughter-in-law had begun building a case for changing my life instead of simply telling me the truth. I closed the brochure and put it in the drawer beside Susan Parker's old real estate card. I didn't throw it away. Something told me I might need it later. And from that day forward, whenever Lauren expressed concern about my age, I stopped listening only to what she said. I started asking myself what she might gain if everyone believed her. Once I understood that Lauren's concern might have a purpose, I began noticing things I had previously dismissed. Not dramatic things. That was what made them so unsettling. If Lauren had suddenly announced that I was incapable of managing my life, I would have laughed in her face. Daniel probably would have too. Instead, she collected moments. Tiny ones. The kind every person has. The first happened on a Thursday afternoon after I returned from the literacy program. Lauren had stopped by with a container of soup. She found me standing beside the kitchen counter looking through my purse. "What are you looking for, my reading glasses?" She immediately put down the container. "Where did you last have them if I knew that I wouldn't be looking?" She didn't smile. Instead, she watched me check the counter and living room. "Does this happen often?" I stopped. "Does what happen often?" "Losing things." "I haven't lost them. I've misplaced them." "Isn't that the same thing?" "No. Lost means I need new glasses. Misplaced means they'll appear somewhere ridiculous." They did. 5 minutes later, I found them on top of a cookbook. I had put them there while answering the phone. "See," I said. Lauren smiled, but she didn't look relieved. 2 days later, Daniel called. After we discussed his work, he said, "Lauren mentioned you lost your glasses." I closed my eyes. I did not lose my glasses. "Okay. They were on a cookbook." "Mom, I'm not accusing you of anything." "Then why are we discussing my glasses?" He laughed awkwardly. "Lauren worries." That phrase again. I wanted to tell him that Lauren's worry was becoming exhausting. Instead, I changed the subject. A week later, we went to dinner. Daniel mentioned a restaurant where we had eaten for Lauren's birthday several months earlier. For a moment, I couldn't remember its name. "The Italian place," I said. "The one downtown with the terrible parking." "Bellini's?" Daniel asked. "Yes." Lauren looked at me. "You didn't remember Bellini's?" "I remembered the restaurant. I forgot the name. You loved it." "I can love pasta without memorizing the building." Daniel smiled. Lauren leaned forward. "Have you noticed yourself forgetting names more often?" There was something clinical about the question. I stared at her. "No. You just forgot this one. And last week Daniel forgot the name of his dentist. Should we be concerned? That's different." "Why?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel intervened. "Can we not diagnose each other over dinner?" Lauren laughed. The conversation moved on. But mine didn't. I started thinking about the way she had asked the question. Not teasing, not casually, as if she were gathering information. The grocery incident happened 3 weeks later. I stopped at the store after volunteering and bought milk, vegetables, chicken bread, and a few other things. When I got home, my neighbor Carol was outside walking her dog. Carol had recently returned from visiting her sister in Arizona, so we stood near my driveway talking. Maybe 15 or 20 minutes passed. Then I carried the groceries inside. Lauren arrived shortly afterward to return a serving platter. She saw the bags on the counter. "Did you just go shopping?" "Yes." She touched the milk carton. "This isn't very cold. I was talking to Carol." "You left groceries in the car for a few minutes." How long? I looked at her. "Lauren, are you conducting an investigation?" "I'm asking because food can spoil. The milk survived. You could have forgotten it completely." "But I didn't." She sighed. "You always get defensive, and you always turn ordinary things into warnings. I care about you, then care about me without treating me like I'm disappearing." The words came out more sharply than I intended. Lauren stepped back. Her face changed. For half a second, she looked genuinely hurt. That made me feel guilty. "I'm sorry," I said. "But this constant questioning is getting uncomfortable." "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable." "Then stop." She nodded. "I will." She didn't. The question simply became more subtle. "Did you remember your appointment? Are you sure you paid that bill? Have you been sleeping okay? Do you ever get confused when you're driving?" Then came the medication question. I was taking one prescription for cholesterol. One. Lauren watched me open the bottle one morning and asked, "Are you sure you haven't already taken that?" In that I stared at her. "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because I haven't taken it." "Maybe you should get one of those weekly organizers. For one pill it might help." Help with what? She didn't answer. The worst part was that Daniel began changing too. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. He started calling after I drove somewhere. "Let me know when you get home." He suggested putting a smart camera near my front door. "For security," he said. Then he suggested a device that could detect falls. I haven't fallen. It doesn't hurt to be prepared. One Sunday, he asked whether I wanted him to have access to my online utility accounts just in case. I said no. His face showed surprise. That frightened me. Not because Daniel was threatening me. He wasn't. But Lauren's version of me was beginning to influence the way my own son saw me. I needed someone outside the family, so I called Maggie Sullivan. Maggie had been my friend for more than 30 years. We met when we were both young teachers. Later, she became a school counselor while I moved into administration. If I wanted sympathy, Maggie could give it. If I wanted truth, she could give that too. We met at a small cafe near Cary. I told her everything: the questions, the brochure, the house, the investment trouble, the glasses, the restaurant, the groceries. Maggie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stirred her tea. "Do you think you're having memory problems?" The question irritated me immediately. Then I realized why she had asked. "No." "Have other people mentioned anything?" "No." "Your doctor?" "No." "Me?" "No." She nodded. "Then here's what bothers me. What Lauren isn't describing your life. She's collecting examples." I felt a chill. Maggie leaned forward. "If I followed you around for 6 months and wrote down every time you misplaced something, forgot a name, repeated yourself, or got distracted, I could create a very convincing list." She pointed at herself. "You could do the same to me. That doesn't mean Lauren has some plan." "No, it doesn't." Maggie was careful. "But Teresa, selective information can create a story. And once people hear the same story enough times, they start looking for evidence that supports it." I thought about Daniel. The extra calls, the camera suggestion, the utility accounts. What should I do? Don't start a war based on suspicion. I wasn't planning to. Good. Document. I looked at her. Document what? Conversations, dates, questions about money, things Lauren says about your memory, anything that makes you uncomfortable. That sounds paranoid. It sounds organized. I smiled despite myself. You always were better at this than I was. No, you just had an office and could send difficult people home. We both laughed. Then Maggie reached across the table. There's another reason. What if Lauren is genuinely worried? Your notes may help you understand why. If she's doing something else, you'll have a record. That evening, I bought a plain black notebook. I felt ridiculous writing the first entry. April 14th, Lauren asked whether I remembered taking my medication. 1 prescription. No missed doses. Then, April 17, Daniel suggested access to utility accounts just in case. April 21, Lauren mentioned selling house would eliminate maintenance. April 25, Lauren asked again whether I drive after dark. The notebook began filling faster than I expected, and writing things down changed me. I stopped reacting immediately. I started observing. Lauren didn't know. Daniel didn't know. For the first time in months, I felt as though I was standing outside the situation instead of being pushed through it. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Lauren came over to use my printer. Hers wasn't working, she said, and she needed to print several documents before a meeting. I was preparing to leave for the grocery store. Help yourself. She worked in my small home office while I got ready. When I returned about 40 minutes later, Lauren was gone. She had texted, "Had to run. Thanks for printer." I carried my groceries into the kitchen. Then I noticed the printer still had paper in the output tray. 1 page. I assumed it was mine until I picked it up. It was clearly part of an email. I wasn't trying to invade Lauren's privacy. I intended to set it aside. Then I saw my name, Teresa Reynolds. My stomach tightened. I read the sentence above it. Based on what you've described, we can begin discussing a transition timeline whenever the family is ready. I stopped breathing for a second. Below my name were several words that made my hands cold. Living alone, increasing forgetfulness, resistance to downsizing, family concerns. I lowered myself into the desk chair. The message was addressed to Lauren, and the signature at the bottom belonged to someone whose title I had never seen before. Senior Living Advisor. Maggie's warning came back to me. Selective information can create a story. I looked at the printed page again. Lauren wasn't merely telling Daniel that I was becoming forgetful. She had been telling someone else, someone I had never met, someone who was apparently helping her build a transition timeline for my life. I reached for my black notebook. For the first time, my hand shook as I wrote the date. Then I turned back to the email, because I had only read the first paragraph. And what came next would finally tell me how far Lauren had already gone. I sat in front of that single sheet of paper for several minutes before I could make myself continue reading. Part of me wanted to stop. There is a peculiar kind of pain in discovering that people you love have been discussing your life in rooms where you were never invited. As long as I didn't read the rest, I could still tell myself Lauren had simply asked a few innocent questions. Then I saw the next paragraph. Based on the home value range you mentioned, monthly costs should remain manageable once the property is sold. I read it twice. Once the property is sold. Not if. Once. The wording made my skin go cold. Lauren hadn't merely told a stranger that I was forgetful. She had discussed selling my home. I continued. The email was from a woman named Rebecca Hayes, whose signature identified her as a senior living sales coordinator. Rebecca thanked Lauren for providing additional family background and explained that several independent living units might become available during the summer. There were references to monthly fees, meal plans, transportation, housekeeping, future assisted care options. None of those things offended me. In fact, under different circumstances, I might have found them interesting. William and I had discussed aging honestly. We knew neither of us would remain 40 forever. We had talked about modifying the house, hiring help, or moving somewhere smaller if our needs changed. But those conversations had always contained one important word. We. This conversation contained everyone except me. Then I reached the section describing my situation. Recently widowed. That was technically true, although William had been gone 3 years. Living alone in a large home. True. Increasingly forgetful. Not true. Showing resistance to discussing transition. How could I resist a conversation no one had actually had with me? Lauren had taken my refusal to surrender my home and transformed it into evidence that I was unreasonable. I read further. Rebecca suggested that family members often encountered resistance when an older parent associated moving with loss of independence. She recommended focusing on safety, social opportunities, and freedom from home maintenance. Then came the sentence I would remember almost word for word. Once the home is sold, finances should not be an issue, particularly if the valuation you provided is accurate. The valuation you provided. I leaned back. My house, my money, my supposed forgetfulness, my future. Lauren had discussed all of it with a woman I had never met. I looked toward the doorway of my office as if Lauren might suddenly appear. Then anger hit me. Not confusion, not embarrassment. Anger. I reached for my phone. Daniel's number was at the top of my favorites. My thumb hovered over it. I wanted to call him and ask one question. Did you know if he said yes, I didn't know what I would do? If he said no, I might destroy his marriage with a single conversation. So I didn't call. Instead, I heard Maggie's voice. Document. I photographed every section of the page. Then I carried it to the kitchen, placed it inside a large envelope, and wrote the date across the front. After that, I sat down with my black notebook. I wrote exactly where I found the email. I recorded the time Lauren had arrived, the reason she said she needed my printer, the text she sent after leaving. Then I wrote the phrases that concerned me, increasingly forgetful. Transition timeline. Once the property is sold, valuation you provided. When I finished, I closed the notebook. My anger hadn't disappeared, but it had become useful. I needed advice. Not from Daniel. Not from Lauren. Not even from Maggie. I needed someone who understood exactly what William and I had done with our finances. I went to the drawer beside the refrigerator where I kept business cards. Jonathan Pierce's card was still there. Pierce and Caldwell Estate Law. Jonathan had been William's attorney for years. He had helped us with Will's estate planning, property documents, and the trust William insisted we establish. I knew the broad outlines. But William had always understood the details better than I did. I called. Jonathan's assistant answered. When I gave my name, her tone warmed immediately. Mrs. Reynolds. Of course. How are you? I've been better. There was a pause. Would you like to speak with Mr. Pierce? Yes. Jonathan came on several minutes later. Teresa. Hearing his voice almost broke something in me. Jonathan, I need to ask you some questions about the house. His tone changed immediately. What happened, I told him. Not everything at first. I started with Lauren's questions about the mortgage and deed, then the assisted living brochure, then Daniel and Lauren's investment trouble, then Lauren's comments about my memory. Jonathan did not interrupt. Finally, I told him about the email. What exactly does it say? He asked. I read the most important passages. Silence followed. Teresa, have you signed anything recently? No. Anything Lauren or Daniel brought you? No. Any power of attorney? None. Any real estate documents? Absolutely not. Good. The firmness of that word frightened me. Jonathan, what are you thinking? I don't want to speculate before I see the document. Do you think they're trying to sell my house? I think someone is discussing the possibility. That isn't the same thing? No. His calmness helped. He wasn't feeding my fear. He was separating what we knew from what we suspected. No one can simply sell your property because they think you should move, he said. And discussing senior living doesn't give anyone authority over you. I know. Do you? The question irritated me. Then I realized he was asking something legal, not personal. I suppose I know emotionally. Then let's make sure you understand legally. He asked me to bring the email, my notebook, the brochure, and any other relevant papers. Then he asked, does Daniel have a copy of the Reynolds family trust? I don't know. Think. I tried. After William died, Jonathan had given us several folders. Daniel had attended one meeting, but grief had turned that period into a blur. He knows there is a trust. That wasn't my question. I don't think he has the full document. What about Lauren? No. Are you certain as I can be? Jonathan paused. Then he asked something that seemed strangely specific. Has Daniel ever explained to Lauren exactly how William structured the house? I frowned. What do you mean? Has he ever told her precisely who controls the property, what rights beneficiaries have, or how distributions work? I don't know. Has Lauren ever mentioned the trust? I thought about every conversation. The deed, the mortgage, taxes, insurance, inheritance. But never the trust. No. Jonathan exhaled. Good. That wasn't the reaction I expected. Why is that good? Because until we understand what she's doing, I don't want you educating her. The sentence silenced me. Educating her about what? We'll discuss that when you come in. Jonathan. Teresa. I'm not trying to be mysterious. I want the document in front of us before I explain provisions from memory. That was Jonathan. Precise even when precision drove me crazy. When can I see you tomorrow morning? I volunteer tomorrow. Can you come afterward? Yes. Bring everything. Before we hung up, he added one more instruction. Don't confront Lauren tonight. I wasn't planning to. And don't ask Daniel whether he knows about the email. Why? Because right now you have something valuable. What information they don't know you have? I looked at the envelope on my kitchen table. For months I had been the one who didn't know what was happening. Now for the first time that imbalance had shifted. After the call, I walked through the house slowly. The late afternoon sun filled the living room. William's old reading chair still sat beside the fireplace. I had considered giving it away after he died. I never could. I touched the worn leather armrest. What did you do, William? I whispered. I remembered sitting beside him in Jonathan's office years earlier, while documents passed across a polished conference table. William had insisted on reading everything. I had teased him. You realize Jonathan charges by the hour. William hadn't smiled. This matters. At the time I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I wished I had listened more carefully. My phone buzzed. Lauren. For a second I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. Hi, Lauren. Did I leave a page in your printer? There it was. My pulse quickened. I looked directly at the envelope. I saw some paper. Was it an email? I didn't really look. The lie came more easily than I expected. Oh. I think I accidentally printed something I didn't need. I can check. No, don't worry. Just throw it away. I stared at the envelope. All right. Thanks. She sounded relieved. We spoke for another minute about nothing. When the call ended, I placed the phone beside me. Then I opened my notebook and added another entry. Lauren called asking whether she left the email. asked me to throw it away. I underlined the final sentence. The next morning, I dressed for the literacy program as usual. I refused to let Lauren's plans interrupt the life she seemed so convinced I could no longer manage. After volunteering, I drove directly to Jonathan's office. He was waiting. On the conference table sat a thick binder I recognized immediately: Reynolds Family Trust. Jonathan closed the office door. He looked at the email I had brought. Then he looked at me. "Teresa," he said quietly, "before we discuss what Lauren appears to be planning, there's something you need to understand." He placed his hand on the binder. "Your husband anticipated that someday someone might pressure you financially." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan opened the trust. And for the first time since William died, I was about to discover that my husband had prepared for a problem I never knew he feared. For several seconds I could only stare at the binder beneath Jonathan's hand. My husband anticipated this. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. He opened the Reynolds Family Trust and turned several pages with the careful familiarity of someone who had read them many times before. "I want to choose my words carefully," he said. "William did not predict Lauren. He did not tell me that someday your daughter-in-law would try to move you into senior living." Despite everything, I almost smiled. That would have been impressive. Jonathan smiled briefly too. "No. What William worried about was financial pressure." The smile disappeared from my face. "From Daniel, potentially." That word hurt. I looked toward the window. Jonathan's office overlooked a quiet street lined with mature oaks. Cars passed below. People walked in and out of a coffee shop across the road. Ordinary life continued while I sat there discovering that my late husband had apparently been worried about our son. Why didn't he tell me? I think he did. I turned back. When many times, according to him, you simply didn't hear it as a warning. I immediately thought about William's arguments with Daniel. Never spend money in your head before it belongs to you. I had treated that as one of William's financial sayings. Apparently it had meant more. Jonathan slid the binder toward me. "Let's start with the house." I straightened. "Yes. Do you remember when you and William transferred the property into the trust generally? Tell me what you remember." I thought back. We had been sitting in this same office, although Jonathan had occupied a smaller suite then. William had spent weeks organizing statements and property documents. I remember signing something transferring ownership. Correct. I thought it was primarily to make things easier after one of us died. That was part of it. Jonathan turned the binder so I could see. "The house is owned by the Reynolds Family Trust." I nodded slowly. "And what does that mean now?" "It means the property did not simply become Daniel's inheritance when William died. I never thought it did." "No. But Daniel may." That landed heavily. Jonathan continued. "You are the current trustee, I know that much. And the primary lifetime beneficiary, yes. You also have broad authority under the trust to manage the property according to its terms." Meaning? "Meaning you decide whether you continue living there." I felt something inside me loosen. "You decide whether the property is sold. If it is sold, you control how trust proceeds are managed and reinvested subject to the trust terms. You have authority over permitted distributions. Daniel does not." I stared at him. "Daniel can't force a sale, no." Could Lauren? Jonathan gave me a look. "Absolutely not." The speed of his answer almost made me laugh. "What if they convinced people I shouldn't live alone?" "That is a different issue from ownership. And based on everything you've told me, we're nowhere near a legal determination that you lack capacity." He leaned back. "Teresa being 69 is not legal incapacity. I wish someone would explain that to Lauren. I suspect we may eventually have that opportunity." I looked down at the trust. "What exactly does Daniel get?" Jonathan folded his hands. "That question is more complicated than Daniel may realize." I waited. "Daniel is a potential future beneficiary. But that does not mean he currently owns the house, controls it, or has a guaranteed right to that specific property. He's my only child." "Yes. So naturally he assumed," Jonathan interrupted gently. "Family expectations and legal rights are not the same thing." The sentence was simple. It changed everything. I thought about Lauren asking whether William had put the deed solely in my name. If she understood the trust, she wouldn't have asked that question. She had been searching for information. What happens when I die? Jonathan answered carefully, walking me through the structure. Certain remaining assets could eventually pass according to the trust's beneficiary provisions, but the amount and form depended on what remained, what decisions I made during my lifetime, and provisions William had included. So Daniel doesn't own some invisible future version of my house. Exactly. I sat back. For weeks I had felt as though everyone else knew something about my future that I didn't. Now I realized the opposite might be true. Lauren had calculations. She had property values. She had senior living costs. She had a transition timeline, but she might have built the entire plan around a misunderstanding. Why did William structure it this way? Jonathan's expression changed. That was when the conversation became painful again. Your husband loved Daniel. I know. Very much. I know that too. But William worried about Daniel's approach to financial risk. I remembered more arguments. Daniel buying an expensive truck shortly after college. A business idea with a friend that William advised him against. An investment Daniel had described as almost guaranteed. William had always been the brake. I had usually been the softer parent. You rescued Daniel a few times, Jonathan said. I bristled. That's what parents do. Sometimes. The word irritated me. Jonathan noticed. I'm not criticizing you. I'm telling you how William described the pattern. What pattern? When Daniel made a financial mistake, you wanted to reduce the consequences. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. William had said almost exactly that. Years earlier, Daniel had accumulated credit card debt. I paid part of it. Another time, he lost money on a vehicle he bought and quickly resold. I helped cover the difference. None of those amounts threatened my security. I had considered them help. William had considered them lessons interrupted. William once told me something, Jonathan said. What he said. Teresa thinks saving Daniel from pain is the same thing as helping him. My eyes filled immediately. Hearing William's name was one thing. Hearing his words was another. That sounds like him. Jonathan nodded. He wasn't angry when he said it. No. He would have been worried. He was. I looked down. For a moment the office disappeared. I could see William sitting at our kitchen table, glasses low on his nose, reading financial statements while I told him he worried too much. I wished I could go back and listen differently. Did he think Daniel would take advantage of me? Jonathan considered the question. I don't think William believed Daniel was malicious. Neither do I. But he believed desperation changes people. That sentence stayed in the room. Daniel was desperate now. Lauren perhaps even more so. Jonathan tapped the trust. William wanted your security protected from anyone else's emergency. I swallowed. Even Daniel's. Especially family. That hurt because it made sense. A stranger couldn't make me feel guilty for refusing money. Daniel could. Lauren could. Love was leverage whether anyone intended it to be or not. I wiped beneath one eye. So what do I do? For now, nothing dramatic. That seems to be everyone's favorite advice. Jonathan smiled. Dramatic decisions are usually expensive. That definitely sounds like something William taught you, the other way around perhaps. He turned several pages. There are provisions here I want to review carefully before we decide whether they matter. What provisions will get there? I frowned. You're doing that lawyer thing again. What lawyer thing? Answering one question with 3 future appointments. He laughed. Then his expression became serious. There's something else. My stomach tightened. What your call wasn't the first reason I've thought about this property recently. I stared at him. What does that mean? Jonathan reached toward a yellow legal pad on the corner of his desk. A few weeks ago, someone contacted my office asking about ownership of the Reynolds property. For a moment, I didn't understand. My property? Yes. Who, not Daniel? Lauren, not directly. He looked at his notes. The inquiry came from a real estate professional. My heartbeat quickened. What did they want confirmation about how title was held and whether you individually had authority to sell? I felt cold. What did you tell them? Nothing substantive. We don't disclose client information to strangers. Did they say why they were asking? Not clearly. Who gave them your name? That wasn't stated. I thought about the email. Once the property is sold, the valuation you provided. I thought about Lauren's questions. The deed, the mortgage, the land, the taxes. This was no longer merely a daughter-in-law browsing senior living websites. Someone had started asking questions about the legal structure of my home. Do you know who the real estate person was? Jonathan nodded. He picked up the yellow pad. Then he wrote something on a small piece of paper and slid it across the desk. I looked down. The name meant nothing to me. Evan Mitchell, Residential and Land Sales. I've never heard of him. I didn't think you had. Does he know Lauren? I don't know yet. I looked at Jonathan. You said yet. He didn't deny it. I made a few appropriate inquiries after your call this morning, and I don't want to give you conclusions before I have facts. I nearly laughed. William must have loved you. We got along very well. I stared again at the name. Evan Mitchell. A stranger had been asking how my house was owned. A stranger I had never contacted. A stranger who somehow knew Jonathan Pierce represented our family. I folded the paper and placed it in my purse. Then Jonathan said something that changed my fear into something colder. Teresa, don't call this man. Why not? Because right now, whoever is asking questions doesn't know that you're asking questions too. I understood. For months, Lauren had watched me. My memory, my driving, my stairs, my house. Now I would watch her. I stood to leave. Jonathan walked me to the door. Before opening it, he said, "One more thing." I turned. If Lauren asks about the trust, don't lie. All right. But don't volunteer anything. Why? Because if her plan depends on an assumption about what Daniel will someday inherit, I want to know exactly what she believes before we correct her. I walked out carrying the email, my notebook, and the name of a real estate professional I had never met. When I reached my car, I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat behind the wheel thinking about William. For 3 years, I had believed the trust was simply paperwork left behind by a cautious husband. Now I understood it differently. It was a boundary. One William had built around me before I knew I would need it. But another question had replaced the first. Lauren had asked about my house. She had researched senior living. She had discussed selling my property. And now someone connected to real estate was asking how that property could legally be sold. I no longer wondered whether Lauren was planning something. I wanted to know how far she had already gone. I kept Evan Mitchell's name folded inside my purse for 3 days. I didn't call him. I didn't search for him. I didn't mention him to Daniel or Lauren. That required more restraint than I expected. Every instinct I had as a mother told me to confront the problem immediately. For most of my life, when something went wrong in my family, I tried to fix it before bedtime. William used to tease me about that. You think every problem is a fire, Teresa. Some are, and some are candles. You keep throwing buckets of water at both. Sitting alone in my kitchen that Friday morning, I could almost hear him saying it. So I waited. Jonathan called shortly after 10. I have some information, he said. I sat down. About Evan Mitchell. Yes, my hand tightened around the phone. Tell me. He's a legitimate real estate professional. Residential property, some land transactions mostly, Wake County and surrounding areas. So he's not some scammer. No. Does he know Lauren? There appears to be a connection. I closed my eyes. What kind? Nothing dramatic. Lauren contacted someone in her professional circle asking for a recommendation. That person referred her to Mitchell. I felt a slow wave of anger. Are you sure? Reasonably. What did she ask him to do? That part is less clear. Jonathan. Teresa. I won't tell you something is a fact when it isn't. I sighed. I know. What we do know is that Mitchell made a preliminary inquiry concerning ownership structure of your property. Did Lauren give him my address? I can't confirm that directly. But how else would he know which property? Jonathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, a delivery truck stopped at my neighbor's house. My neighborhood looked exactly as it always had. Yet the house around me felt different. It had become the subject of conversations I wasn't part of. Could they sell it without me, I asked. No. You're certain? Yes. Could Daniel know? Could Lauren? Could anyone do anything if I refused? Not based on what you've shown me. I let out a breath. Jonathan continued. There's no sale contract, no transfer, no listing agreement that I'm aware of, no evidence anyone has attempted to forge your signature or illegally convey property. That mattered. I didn't want fear turning Lauren into a criminal when the facts didn't support it. So what has she done? From what we can establish, she's been gathering information. About selling a house she doesn't own. Yes. While telling people I'm forgetful. Yes. And arranging senior living. Apparently. I sat down again. When you say it like that, it sounds worse. It sounds like what it is. Should I confront her now? No. The answer came instantly. Why? Because we still don't know her actual proposal. I think I can guess. Guessing and knowing are different. He paused. Let her explain it. I understood what he meant. If I confronted Lauren with the email and real estate inquiry, she could retreat. She could say she was only researching. She could deny any larger plan. But if I waited, she might reveal exactly what she intended. I hate this, I said. I know. I feel like I'm setting a trap for my own family. You're not. It feels like it. You're allowing adults to explain their own actions before you respond. That sounded better. It didn't feel better. After we hung up, I called Maggie. She answered on the second ring. Well, how do you know there's a well? Because you only call me before lunch when something happened. I told her about Evan Mitchell. For once, Maggie didn't make a joke. She contacted a real estate person, apparently through someone she knows. And Jonathan says, wait, yes. What do you think? I want to drive to Lauren's house, put the email on her kitchen table and ask whether she'd like me to choose her next home too. Maggie laughed. There she is. But I'm going to wait. Good. I don't like how pleased you sound. Teresa, you spent 30 years telling teachers not to react before they had all the facts. I hated administrators who said things like that. You were one. Exactly. She became serious. Keep copies of everything. I have. Not only in your house. I hadn't thought of that. What do you mean if Lauren has been using your printer and coming over regularly? Don't keep the only copies somewhere she could accidentally find them. The idea made me uncomfortable. But Maggie was right. That afternoon, I made copies of the email-relevant notebook pages and the senior living brochure. I placed them in a large envelope. Maggie picked it up that evening. I feel like we're in a spy movie, I said. If this were a spy movie, you'd need better sunglasses. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had all week. Then Sunday evening, Lauren called. Her voice was bright. Too bright. Teresa, are you free? Tuesday afternoon, I believe so. I thought we could have a girls' afternoon. I almost smiled. A girls' afternoon? Yes, just us. What did you have in mind? It's a surprise. My eyes moved toward the drawer where I had stored the assisted living brochure. What kind of surprise if I tell you it won't be one? I've reached an age where I prefer warnings. She laughed. Trust me. Those two words landed strangely. Trust me. All right, I said. Really? She sounded almost surprised. Yes. Wonderful. I'll pick you up at 11:30. For lunch, we can eat afterward. Where are we going, Teresa? All right. Your secret is safe. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table. I knew. Maybe not with absolute certainty, but I knew. The next morning, I called Jonathan. Lauren is taking me somewhere Tuesday. Where she won't say. What do you think, senior living? Silence. Then Jonathan asked, do you want to go? That question mattered. No one else had asked me that. I considered it. Yes. Why? Because you told me to let her explain her plan. I told you not to confront her prematurely. I didn't tell you to put yourself through something humiliating. I need to know. Jonathan accepted that. Then go. I want to meet with you afterward. Of course. No. I mean, I want something scheduled now. There was a pause. Wednesday morning. Yes, 10 perfect. I wrote it in my calendar. Then Jonathan said, Teresa, if she presents documents, don't sign anything. I wasn't planning to. Not even something described as informational. Jonathan, I have to say it. I know. And if you become uncomfortable, leave. I will. For the rest of Monday, I went about my normal routine: laundry, grocery shopping, a walk around the neighborhood. I called Daniel once. He sounded distracted. He did not mention Lauren's planned outing. That interested me. Either he didn't know or he was deliberately avoiding the subject. I didn't ask. At 8:13 that evening, my phone buzzed. Lauren, wear comfortable shoes tomorrow. I really think once you see everything, you'll understand how much easier life could be. I stared at the message. There was no longer much doubt. I typed, I'll be ready. Then I set the phone down. For a moment, fear crept in. Not fear of a senior living community. Fear of what Lauren had already told people about me. Would someone expect a confused old woman? Would they speak slowly? Would Lauren answer for me? Would there be paperwork? Had she already calculated what my home could sell for? Then something inside me hardened. Lauren believed she was bringing me into a conversation she controlled. She didn't know about the printed email. She didn't know I had spoken to Jonathan. She didn't know I understood the trust better than I had 6 months earlier. And she certainly didn't know I knew about Evan Mitchell. For months I had been reacting to Lauren. Tomorrow I would observe her. I laid out navy slacks, a white blouse, and comfortable flats. Then I placed my black notebook inside my purse. Not because I planned to take notes in front of her. I wanted it with me as a reminder. I book inside my purse. Not because I planned to take notes in front of her. I wanted it with me as a reminder. I wasn't confused, I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't imagining what had been happening. The next morning, Lauren arrived precisely at 11:30. Of course she did. Her SUV was spotless. She stepped out wearing a cream jacket and sunglasses. You look nice, she said. So do you. Ready as I'll ever be. I locked my front door. Lauren watched me check the handle. For one irrational second, I wondered whether she was mentally adding that to her list. Teresa checks door twice. Forgetfulness. I almost laughed. Instead, I walked to the passenger side. As I opened the door, I noticed something on the rear seat. A leather folder. Thick. Organized. Several papers protruded from the top. Lauren quickly reached back and pulled it closer to herself. What's that? I asked. Just some information. About our surprise. She smiled. You'll see. I fastened my seatbelt. As we backed out of my driveway, I looked at the house. The maple tree. The brick steps. The upstairs window of the room where Daniel had slept as a boy. Lauren followed my gaze. You know, she said gently, sometimes holding on to a place can make moving forward harder. I turned toward her. Sometimes. She seemed pleased by my answer. What Lauren didn't understand was that I had already decided not to argue with her. Not yet. I would let her drive. I would let her talk. I would let her open that folder. I would let her show me every calculation, every assumption, and every piece of the future she had designed without asking me. Because Jonathan was right. I needed facts. And if Lauren believed my silence meant agreement, then perhaps for once her habit of underestimating me would work in my favor. 20 minutes later, she turned off the main road. Ahead of us, beyond a row of flowering trees, I saw an elegant stone entrance. Then the sign came into view. Independent and assisted living. Lauren smiled. I looked at the leather folder beside her, and I understood that the moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. Lauren was about to put her entire plan on the table. She just didn't know that I had already seen the cards in her hand. The entrance curved through beds of white hydrangeas and young maple trees. The kind of landscaping designed to make everything feel peaceful before you ever stepped inside. Lauren slowed beside a fountain. There, she said brightly. Isn't this beautiful? I looked at the stone building ahead of us. It was beautiful. That almost made me angrier. If the place had been depressing, I could have focused on that. I could have criticized the building, the rooms, the atmosphere. But the building wasn't the problem. The problem was sitting beside me. Why are we here? I asked. Lauren kept her eyes on the road. I thought you might enjoy seeing it. You told me we were having a girls' afternoon. We are. This isn't lunch. We can have lunch afterward. She pulled into a visitor space and turned off the engine. I didn't move. Lauren, she sighed. We're just looking, Teresa. There's no reason to make this emotional. That sentence did it. Not the facility, not even the deception. The suggestion that if I objected to someone planning my future without permission, I was being emotional. Then I noticed the leather folder. It rested against Lauren's thigh. A sheet of paper had slipped partly out. My address was printed across the top. Underneath it, estimated property value. I stared at it. Lauren noticed. She pushed the paper back inside. What's that just information? About my house, Teresa. Let's go inside first. Why is information about my house coming on a tour I never asked for? She opened her door. Because everything is connected. I stayed seated. She looked back. Are you coming? I thought about Jonathan. Let her explain it. So I opened my door. The lobby looked more like an upscale hotel than any nursing home I remembered from childhood. There were high ceilings, comfortable chairs, fresh flowers, a fireplace, and a coffee bar. A woman in her early 50s approached us with a welcoming smile. Lauren. Yes, I'm Rebecca Hayes. My stomach tightened. Rebecca. The name from the email. Then she turned toward me. And you must be Teresa. I'm so glad to finally meet you. Finally. I smiled politely. Have you heard a lot about me? Rebecca glanced at Lauren. Lauren has shared some background so we could make today's visit useful. I see. Lauren touched my elbow. Mom. I moved my arm gently away. She almost never called me Mom. Rebecca either didn't notice or pretended not to. Why don't we start with coffee, she suggested. We sat in a small lounge overlooking a courtyard. Rebecca explained the community. Independent living. Assisted living if needs changed. Meals, transportation, fitness classes, book clubs, trips, housekeeping. The place sounded perfectly respectable. Then Rebecca said Lauren mentioned you've had some concerns about living alone. I looked directly at her. No, I haven't. Rebecca paused. Lauren immediately stepped in. Teresa is very independent. Sometimes that makes these conversations difficult. I turned toward her. These conversations would be less difficult if I had been included in them. Rebecca's smile faded. I apologize if I've misunderstood. You haven't done anything wrong, I said. You've apparently been given information that didn't come from me. Lauren shifted. We've talked about this. No, you've talked around it. Rebecca folded her hands. Perhaps we should focus on what you want, Teresa. Thank you. Lauren's jaw tightened. For the next half hour, we toured the building. I asked questions because I genuinely wanted answers. What happened if a resident needed temporary rehabilitation? How were medical emergencies handled? Could residents use outside physicians? What were the annual fee increases? Rebecca answered carefully. Lauren kept interrupting. When Rebecca asked what kind of apartment I might prefer, Lauren said, she wouldn't need more than one bedroom. I looked at her. Rebecca corrected herself. What would you prefer, Teresa? I haven't decided that I prefer any apartment. Lauren exhaled. That's why we're looking. No, that's why you're looking. We continued. At one point, Rebecca showed us a library. I liked it. There was a reading area beside tall windows and several shelves of large print books. I thought of my literacy students. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed visiting a place like this. That realization mattered. I didn't want my anger at Lauren to become contempt for people who chose senior living. Choice was the entire point. We eventually entered a model apartment. It had a small kitchen, one bedroom, a balcony, and enough space for a dining table. Lauren walked around as if she were evaluating it for me. Your little round table would fit there. My table seats 8. Exactly. You wouldn't need something that large. I stared at her. She pointed toward the living room. You could bring your blue chair. Maybe that small cabinet from the hallway. And the rest, Lauren hesitated. Well, obviously you couldn't bring everything. Everything. 37 years reduced to what would fit inside a model apartment. William's books. My grandmother's china cabinet. The dining table where Daniel had done homework. The cedar chest my father built. I knew possessions weren't life, but they were mine to decide what to keep. Lauren looked around. You could bring some of the things that matter most. Some. That word hurt more than it should have. I turned toward Rebecca. How much does this cost? Rebecca began explaining the monthly structure. Lauren immediately reached for her leather folder. Actually, I worked all of that out. Of course she had. She sat at the model dining table and opened the folder. I remained standing. Come look, she said. I walked over. The first page showed monthly senior living costs. The second estimated moving expenses. The third listed projected proceeds from selling my house. I pulled the page toward me. My address. Approximate market value, $1.075, Zosen, $1,150,000. Estimated selling expenses. Estimated net proceeds. I turned another page. Investment projections. Then another. Suggested transition timeline. My hands became cold. This was not research. This was a plan. You've been busy, I said. Lauren heard the danger in my voice. I'm trying to make this easier. For whom? For everyone. Rebecca stood awkwardly near the kitchen. I almost felt sorry for her. I pointed at the property valuation. Who gave you this? It's based on comparable properties. Did Evan Mitchell help? Lauren's face changed. Only for a second. But I saw it. Who? There are lies that fail because the speaker says too much. Lauren's failed because she said too little. You know exactly who. She glanced at Rebecca. This isn't the place. You brought me here. Teresa. You brought paperwork about selling my home into a senior living facility, and now you're telling me this isn't the place to discuss it. Rebecca quietly said, Perhaps I should give you some privacy. Yes, I said. Lauren said nothing. Rebecca stepped outside and closed the door. The moment we were alone, Lauren's expression hardened. I was trying to prevent exactly this. Prevent what you, turning a practical conversation into an accusation. I tapped the page. Why is my house part of this tour? Because if you moved, you wouldn't need it. If I moved, yes, I haven't agreed to move. No one said you had. You've calculated the sale, because you asked what this costs. You calculated it before I arrived. Lauren pushed the folder toward me. Fine. Yes, I researched it. Someone had to. No one had to. You're living alone in a house that's too large for you. According to whom? According to common sense. And the memory problems you've been telling people about? She went still. I watched her carefully. What are you talking about? Rebecca said. You've shared background. I told her what we've noticed. We, Daniel and I. There it was. My heart sank even though I had expected it. What exactly has Daniel noticed? You've been forgetting things. Glasses among other things. A restaurant name. Teresa stopped minimizing. Groceries sitting in a car for 20 minutes. She stared at me. You see, you remember every incident perfectly when you want to argue about them. The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I sat across from her. Does Daniel know about these calculations? Lauren looked away. Does he? He knows we're concerned. That wasn't my question. He knows we need to start making plans. We family. No. Does my son know you calculated the sale of my house? Lauren closed the folder. You're making this uglier than it is. Then make it beautiful for me. She looked confused. Explain it. Silence. I waited. Finally, Lauren spoke. You'd have more than enough money to live here comfortably for the rest of your life, and you wouldn't have maintenance, and you'd be safer. And her mouth tightened. I leaned forward. What happens to the rest of the money, Lauren? That isn't what this is about. Then why did you calculate how much would remain after my lifetime expenses? Her eyes flicked toward the papers. There. I had found the page she didn't want me to notice. I pulled it free. Projected retained assets. A substantial amount remained. I looked at her. Why do you care what's left? Lauren's composure finally cracked. Because we're trying to make a plan that works for everyone. The room became very quiet. There it was. Not for me. For everyone. I folded my hands. Everyone or you. Lauren stood. That is unfair, is it? You know Daniel and I are under pressure, and therefore my house becomes part of your solution. No one is taking anything from you. Not yet. Her face flushed. We are your family. Yes. Daniel is your only child. Yes. And eventually she stopped. But I heard the rest. Eventually. Eventually I would die. Eventually something would be left. Eventually Daniel would inherit. I stood. Finish that sentence. I didn't mean it that way. Then how did you mean it? Lauren grabbed her phone. This is going nowhere. Who are you calling Daniel? I almost told her not to. Then I thought of Jonathan. Facts. Let them explain. So I picked up the leather folder and held it against my chest. Lauren stepped toward me. What are you doing? Taking the information you prepared about my life. Those are my papers. They concern my property. She hesitated. That was enough. Lauren pressed Daniel's number. He answered quickly. Hey. She turned away from me. Daniel, you need to come here. A pause. No now. Another pause. Then Lauren said the sentence that told me exactly how she had been describing me when I wasn't present. Your mother is refusing to be reasonable. I looked around the little apartment she had already imagined filling with selected pieces of my life. Then I looked at the folder containing the price she had quietly placed on my home. For months, Lauren had been constructing a story in which I was confused, resistant, and increasingly incapable of making sensible decisions. But Daniel was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone tell him what I had said, what I remembered, or what I wanted. I would tell him myself. And before we left that building, my son was finally going to answer the question he had been avoiding for months. How much of Lauren's plan had been his plan too? Daniel arrived 27 minutes later. I know because I watched the clock. Lauren spent most of those 27 minutes pretending to answer emails on her phone. I sat in one of the model apartment's armchairs, with the leather folder beside me. Neither of us spoke. Rebecca had wisely disappeared. When Daniel finally appeared in the doorway, his face told me Lauren had not explained everything over the phone. He looked at her first, then at me, then at the folder. What happened? Lauren stood. Your mother refuses to have a rational conversation. I almost laughed. Daniel looked at me. Mom, sit down. He did. Lauren remained standing. Lauren, you too. I don't need, please. Something in my voice stopped her. She sat beside Daniel. I placed the property valuation on the table. Did you know about this? Daniel looked down. His expression changed. Where did you get that? Your wife brought it. He looked at Lauren. Lauren, she crossed her arms. It's research. That wasn't my question, I said. I looked at my son. Did you know she had calculated what my house could sell for? Daniel hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than a quick yes would have. Mom, we talked about possibilities. What possibilities if you ever decided to move? I didn't. I know. Then why were you discussing what happens after I do? Lauren interrupted. Because responsible people plan ahead. I turned toward her. I'm speaking to my son. Her face hardened, but she stopped. Daniel rubbed his palms against his trousers. I knew Lauren was looking at senior communities. Did you know she had contacted this one? I knew she was researching places. Did you know she told them I was increasingly forgetful? His head came up. What I watched Lauren. Daniel followed my gaze. Lauren, I said we'd noticed some things. What things, Daniel? We've talked about this. We've talked about Mom getting older. You didn't tell me you were telling strangers she had memory problems. I didn't say she had dementia. I didn't say you did. Their argument began rising. I lifted my hand. Stop. Both of them looked at me. This is exactly what has been happening for months. People discussing me while I'm sitting right here. Daniel looked ashamed. I'm sorry. Don't apologize yet. Answer me. I pulled out the projected sale proceeds. Did you know about this? He stared at the page. Not those exact numbers. Did you know Lauren had spoken with someone about the value of my property? Another hesitation. I knew she was trying to get an estimate. My chest tightened. So yes. Yes. Did you know about Evan Mitchell? Daniel looked genuinely surprised. Who? I watched him carefully. A real estate professional. He turned toward Lauren. Lauren said nothing. Daniel's face changed. You actually contacted him, I asked questions. You told me you were looking at comps online. I did that too. Daniel stood. You called a realtor about my mother's house. Don't act shocked now. I am shocked. You knew we needed numbers. I didn't tell you to contact someone. Their marriage was cracking open in front of me, but I refused to let Daniel hide inside that crack. You knew she was estimating my house. He looked at me. Yes. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? Daniel sat again. His shoulders dropped. Because I knew how it would sound. That answer was painfully honest. I nodded. Good. Now we're finally getting somewhere. Lauren stared at me. What do you want us to say, Teresa? The truth. We've told you the truth. No. You've given me pieces of it. I looked at Daniel. How bad is the investment? He rubbed his forehead. Worse than when I talked to you. How much worse our partners want out immediately. I know that. They've stopped covering additional expenses, and the lender won't refinance under the current numbers unless we bring in more equity or restructure the deal. How much? Daniel looked at Lauren. She answered, potentially a few $100,000. The number stunned me. A few $100,000. It depends on the appraisal and what we do with Brian and Kelly's share. I stared at Daniel. You told me you might have to sell at a loss. We might. You didn't tell me you were trying to find hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't want you worrying. I almost laughed. That's considerate, Mom. No. You don't get to protect me from knowing about your financial crisis while allowing your wife to plan the sale of my home. Daniel looked down. Lauren leaned forward. No one planned to take your money. Then explain the spreadsheet. It was an option. For whom? For the family. That word again. Family. A beautiful word when it meant love. A dangerous one when it meant obligation. I turned to Daniel. What was supposed to happen? He looked exhausted. Lauren thought if you were going to downsize eventually anyway, I wasn't. I know that now. You knew it before. He closed his eyes. Yes. Continue. He took a breath. If you sold the house, you'd have more than enough to buy something smaller or live somewhere like this. And Lauren answered, and you would still have substantial assets. I ignored her. Daniel. My son looked at me, and Lauren thought maybe you could help us. There it was. Finally. No euphemisms, no safety, no stairs, no memory, money. How much help we never decided. Because I wasn't included in the decision, because there wasn't a decision. Lauren shifted impatiently. Teresa, no one was going to force you. I turned toward her. You arranged a tour without telling me where we were going. To get you through the door, you told a sales coordinator I was forgetful. Because you've been forgetting things. You researched selling my house. Because it's your largest asset. You calculated what would remain after paying for my care. Because numbers matter. And you call that not forcing me, I call it showing you reality. No, Lauren. You created a reality that solved your problem. She stood. Our problem. Daniel is your son. There was the weapon she had been saving. Daniel flinched. I looked at him. Do you agree? He didn't answer. Daniel. I don't know. Yes, you do. He stood and walked toward the model apartment's window. For several seconds he stared outside. Then he turned. I thought you'd help. If you asked, yes. You never asked. I was embarrassed. So instead, you let Lauren build a plan around my house. His eyes filled. I didn't think it would go this far. How far did you think it would go? I thought she'd show you options. I thought maybe you'd realize maintaining that place doesn't make sense forever. For me or for you. He didn't answer. I felt something inside me break. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a thread that had been stretched too long. Do you know what your father used to say? Daniel looked at me. Never spend money in your head before it belongs to you. His face changed. I remember. Did you? He looked away. Lauren exhaled impatiently. This isn't about William. It is to me. I turned back to Daniel. When Lauren calculated these numbers, what did you think the money was? He frowned. What do you mean mine, yours, ours, yours? Then why did you expect access to it because you're my mother? I waited. He immediately realized how it sounded. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He pressed his fingers against his eyes. I don't know. Yes, you do. The room became completely silent. Daniel finally looked at me. I thought eventually the house would come to me anyway. There are sentences that arrive softly and still hit like a door slamming. That was one. I stared at my son. He looked horrified the moment he heard himself say it. Mom. No. I didn't mean you did. Not like that. What other way is there? I wasn't waiting for you to die. But you were counting what would happen when I did. His face collapsed. Lauren said quietly, That's unfair. I turned toward her. Do not tell me what is fair. She stopped. I looked back at Daniel. My only child. The boy whose fever I had sat beside all night. The teenager William and I sent to college. The man I had helped whenever life became difficult. Somewhere along the way, my home had stopped being the place where his mother lived. It had become a future asset. I stood. We're done here. Daniel rose. Mom, please. No. Not today. What happens now? That was the question, wasn't it? Lauren looked at the folder. I picked it up. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Daniel frowned. What, Jonathan Pierce's office? Lauren's expression changed. The estate lawyer? Yes. Why? Because all three of us apparently need the same lesson about my property. Daniel looked worried. Lauren looked thoughtful. Then she surprised me. Actually, that's probably a good idea. I almost smiled. I'm glad you think so. If we're going to discuss options, we should understand the legal and tax implications. There it was. Lauren believed Jonathan might help structure the transaction. She still thought this meeting was a negotiation. Daniel seemed less confident. What exactly are we discussing? I walked toward the door. The future you've both been planning. Lauren followed. Will Jonathan be able to explain how an early distribution could work? I stopped. For 1 second, I considered answering. Then I remembered Jonathan's instruction, don't educate her. So I simply said, he can explain exactly what you're planning around. We left the model apartment. Rebecca was waiting near the lobby. I thanked her. She looked embarrassed. Teresa, I'm sorry if today's visit wasn't what you expected. It wasn't your fault. And I meant it. Outside, Lauren reached for her keys. I'll drive you home. No. She looked surprised. I came with you. I know. I called Maggie. 20 minutes later, she arrived. As I climbed into her car, I looked back. Daniel stood near Lauren's SUV. My son looked smaller somehow. Lauren was already talking to him. Probably calculating. Probably explaining. Probably trying to salvage the plan. I felt no triumph. Only sadness. Maggie waited until we reached the road. Do you want to talk? Not yet. She nodded. We drove in silence. Tomorrow, Lauren would sit across from Jonathan Pierce with her spreadsheets, property valuations, and plans for an inheritance she thought already existed. She believed the lawyer would help us divide the future sensibly. What she didn't know was that William had already defined whose future mattered first. Mine. And tomorrow, Jonathan was finally going to explain that to her. I arrived at Jonathan Pierce's office 25 minutes early. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Daniel's voice. I thought eventually the house would come to me anyway. By morning, the anger had faded enough for the grief underneath it to become clearer. Daniel had not threatened me. He had not forged my signature. He had not tried to physically remove me from my home. In some ways, that made what happened harder to explain. My son had simply begun thinking of my future death as part of his financial future, and Lauren had taken that assumption and turned it into a plan. Jonathan's assistant led me into the conference room. He entered a few minutes later carrying the Reynolds family trust. You look tired, he said. I've looked better. How did yesterday go? I placed Lauren's leather folder on the table. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. She let you keep it? She was too busy arguing with Daniel to stop me. He opened the folder. For several minutes he said nothing. He examined the property valuation, senior living expenses, estimated sale costs, projected investment returns, and the page estimating what might remain after my future living expenses. When he reached the proposed transition timeline, he removed his glasses. This is thorough. That isn't a compliment. No. I told him everything that happened at the facility. When I repeated Danielle's sentence about eventually inheriting the house, Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. William would have hated hearing that. I know. Do you want me to explain the trust today? Yes. All relevant portions. Yes. He studied me. And if Daniel becomes upset, he's 43. Jonathan nodded. And Lauren, she's 40. That almost made him smile. Then his expression became serious. Teresa, today isn't about humiliating anyone. I don't want humiliation. What do you want the truth to be in the same room as all of us? Jonathan nodded. Then that's what we'll do. At exactly 10, his assistant opened the door. Daniel entered first. Lauren followed. Daniel looked as though he had slept about as much as I had. Lauren looked immaculate. Cream blouse, dark trousers, hair perfectly arranged, and in her hands was another folder. Of course. Good morning, Jonathan said. Daniel nodded. Lauren smiled professionally. Thank you for meeting with us on short notice. Us. As though we were a committee. We sat around the conference table. Jonathan took the seat at the head. I sat to his right. Daniel and Lauren sat across from me. For several seconds no one spoke. Then Jonathan said, Teresa asked me to explain the ownership and estate planning structure concerning her home and certain other assets. Lauren nodded. That would be helpful. Daniel stared at the table. Jonathan continued. Before I do, I understand there is a proposal involving Teresa's residence. Lauren glanced at me. I said nothing. She opened her folder. Yes. Although I wouldn't call it a formal proposal. What would you call it, planning? Jonathan nodded. Go ahead. Lauren seemed encouraged. She pulled out a spreadsheet. Teresa is 69 and living alone in a 4-bedroom house. I almost interrupted. Jonathan gave me the smallest glance. Wait. So I waited. Lauren continued. The property requires maintenance. There are stairs. The neighborhood has become busier. And while Teresa is still independent, we've noticed some changes that make us think planning early is responsible. What changes? Jonathan asked. Lauren hesitated. Minor forgetfulness. Daniel shifted. Jonathan noticed. Has Teresa been medically diagnosed with cognitive impairment? No. Has a physician recommended she stop living independently? No. Has she had significant falls? No. Has she stopped managing her finances? No. Stopped driving? No. Jonathan folded his hands. So at present we're discussing a capable adult considering future housing options. Lauren looked uncomfortable. Yes. Good. Continue. I nearly smiled. Lauren moved to her numbers. She explained that a senior community would eliminate home maintenance. My monthly expenses would be predictable. I would have social activities, transportation, meals, and future access to higher levels of care. All reasonable points. Then she reached the house. Based on current comparable sales, Teresa's property could be worth somewhere around $1.1 million. Jonathan did not react. Lauren continued. After selling costs, she would still have substantial proceeds. She pushed a spreadsheet toward him. Even assuming conservative investment returns and long-term senior living expenses, Teresa would remain financially secure. Jonathan studied the page. And what happens to the remaining money? Lauren glanced at Daniel. That depends on what Teresa decides. Jonathan waited. Lauren added, there might be an opportunity to make an early family distribution. There it was. Polite language for the money they needed. Jonathan looked at Daniel. Is that your understanding? Daniel swallowed. I don't know anymore. Lauren turned toward him. Daniel. He shook his head. I said I don't know. Jonathan looked back at Lauren. What would this early distribution be used for? She seemed irritated by the question. We have an investment property experiencing temporary liquidity issues. How much liquidity? That depends. Approximately. Lauren's jaw tightened. A few $100,000. Jonathan nodded as if she had told him the weather. So your proposal is that Teresa sells her home, moves into senior living, invests enough to support herself, and potentially advances Daniel several $100,000. When you say it that way, it sounds transactional. Jonathan looked at her. It is a financial proposal. Transactional language seems appropriate. Daniel lowered his eyes. Lauren leaned forward. Mr. Pierce, we're not trying to take anything from Teresa. We're trying to create a solution that benefits everyone. Does Teresa want to sell? Lauren looked at me. I answered. No. Does Teresa want to move? No. Does Teresa want to advance Daniel several $100,000? No. Jonathan looked back at Lauren. Then at present the proposal appears to benefit someone other than Teresa. Lauren's face reddened. Daniel whispered Lauren stop, but she didn't. Families help each other. They can. And Daniel is her only son. Yes. This money will eventually— Jonathan lifted a hand. Let's stop there. Lauren blinked. Jonathan leaned back. What money will eventually do what? She looked confused. The inheritance. What inheritance? The room became still. Lauren gave a small, nervous laugh. Daniel's inheritance. Jonathan's expression remained neutral. Which inheritance are you referring to? The house, Teresa's estate? Obviously, I understand she controls it while she's alive. Jonathan glanced at me, then back at Lauren. Who told you Daniel is guaranteed to inherit Teresa's house? Lauren's confidence faltered. No one had to tell me. Then you're assuming. Daniel is their only child. That is a family fact, not an ownership document. Daniel finally looked up. What are you saying? Jonathan reached for the thick binder. This is the Reynolds family trust. Lauren stared at it. Jonathan opened to the relevant section. The property where Teresa currently lives was transferred into this trust years ago by Teresa and William Reynolds. Lauren looked at Daniel. He looked equally uncertain. Jonathan continued. Teresa is the current trustee and primary lifetime beneficiary. I understand that, Lauren said. I don't think you do. Her eyes narrowed. Jonathan spoke calmly. Daniel does not own the house. I never said he does now. He does not own a future percentage of it either. Lauren stopped moving. Daniel frowned. What? Jonathan turned toward him. You are a potential future beneficiary under the trust structure. That does not give you present ownership, present control, or a guaranteed right to receive that specific property. Daniel stared at him. But Dad always said your father may have discussed expectations. I can only tell you what the legal documents say. Lauren leaned forward. So if Teresa sells, what happens to the proceeds? They remain trust assets unless distributed or otherwise handled according to the trust. Could Teresa give Daniel money under appropriate circumstances, and within the governing terms, Teresa has certain distribution authority? Lauren's expression brightened slightly. Jonathan noticed. But Daniel cannot demand a distribution. The brightness disappeared. He cannot force a sale, Jonathan continued. He cannot pledge this property as collateral. He cannot use it to establish personal net worth. He cannot instruct Teresa where to live. And he cannot treat the current value of this property as money that belongs to him later. Daniel looked pale. I felt no pleasure watching him hear it, only sadness. Lauren, however, was still calculating. I could almost see it. Fine, she said. But realistically, if Teresa remains the primary beneficiary and Daniel is the only child, eventually the assets have to go somewhere. Jonathan closed the binder halfway. Yes. Lauren waited. So Daniel is still the beneficiary. Jonathan looked at me. Then he reopened the binder. There is another provision. Something in his tone changed the room. Daniel heard it too. What provision? Jonathan turned several pages. William asked that this section be discussed very carefully if circumstances ever made it relevant. Lauren frowned. What circumstances? Jonathan placed one finger beside a paragraph. Circumstances involving financial pressure on Teresa from someone who expects to benefit from this trust. Lauren's face went still. Daniel looked at me. Mom, I said nothing. Jonathan continued. William was particularly concerned that Teresa might someday feel obligated to sacrifice her own financial security. in order to rescue a future beneficiary from the consequences of his or her decisions. Daniel closed his eyes. He knew exactly who his father had been thinking about. Lauren stared at the paragraph. "What does it say?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. "Teresa, are you sure you want me to continue?" I thought about the nursing home brochure, the email, Evan Mitchell, the spreadsheets, my son saying he thought my house would eventually belong to him. Yes. Jonathan turned the trust toward Daniel and Lauren. Then he said quietly, "This provision is the reason neither of you should assume that Daniel's expected inheritance will remain what you think it is." Lauren's face lost its color. And for the first time since she drove me into that senior living community, she wasn't the person in the room who knew what came next. Lauren stared at the open trust, as if the words might rearrange themselves if she waited long enough. Daniel didn't look at the document. He looked at me. "Mom, what does he mean? I think you should let Jonathan explain it." My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Jonathan adjusted his glasses. "I want to be precise because this provision is not an automatic disinheritance clause." Lauren immediately seized on that. "So Daniel isn't being removed." "I didn't say that." "But you just said." "I said nothing happens automatically." Lauren leaned back. Jonathan continued. "William and Teresa created a structure designed primarily to protect Teresa during her lifetime. William was concerned about a situation in which someone who expected to benefit later might pressure Teresa to use trust assets for that person's immediate financial needs." Daniel's face tightened. "My father wrote that because of me." Jonathan considered his answer. "Your father discussed concerns about patterns he had observed." "What patterns?" "Financial risk, expectations of rescue, the possibility that Teresa might place your security above her own." Daniel looked down. I wanted to defend him. That instinct rose automatically. Then I remembered what William had said. "Teresa thinks saving Daniel from pain is the same thing as helping him." For once, I let the discomfort remain where it belonged. Jonathan turned the binder slightly. "The provision preserves broad flexibility for Teresa regarding certain remaining trust assets and beneficiary distributions. If she experiences sustained financial pressure or coercive behavior from someone expecting to benefit." Lauren frowned. "Coercive behavior. Yes, that's a very serious word." "It is. Are you accusing us of coercion?" "No. I'm explaining a document." She crossed her arms. "What exactly can Teresa do?" Jonathan looked at me briefly before answering. "Within the terms William and Teresa established, Teresa retains substantial authority over how certain assets are managed and, where permitted, how eventual distributions are directed. Depending on the asset and provision involved, alternatives can include other family beneficiaries, educational purposes, or charitable organizations." Lauren went completely still. Daniel finally looked at the trust. "So Mom could change what I receive?" Jonathan nodded carefully. "Certain future distributions are not as fixed as you apparently assumed." "How much could change?" "That depends on circumstances, the assets remaining at Teresa's death, and decisions Teresa makes during her lifetime." Lauren leaned forward. "But Daniel is named." "Yes." "Then why name a beneficiary if Teresa can change things?" "Because estate planning is often more complicated than writing someone's name beside a dollar amount." Lauren's cheeks reddened. Jonathan remained calm. "More importantly, the trust was not created to guarantee Daniel a particular lifestyle. It was created to protect Teresa and manage family assets according to William and Teresa's wishes." My throat tightened hearing that. For months, Lauren had spoken about my house as if its purpose was waiting for me to stop needing it, waiting for Daniel to inherit it, waiting to become useful to someone else. Jonathan had reduced the issue to one simple truth. The trust existed for me first. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Dad really thought this might happen." I answered before Jonathan could. "Your father worried that I would rescue you when I shouldn't." Daniel looked at me. "Did you know?" "Oh, not like this." "Then why are we acting like he predicted everything we aren't?" I leaned forward. "He didn't predict Lauren. He didn't predict the duplex. He didn't predict a senior living tour." Lauren flinched, but he knew us. Daniel's eyes filled. I continued. He knew you took risks. He knew I softened consequences. And apparently, he worried there might come a day when love and money became difficult to separate. Daniel whispered, I wasn't trying to take your house. I believe you. Lauren turned toward me sharply. That surprised her. I looked at Daniel. I don't believe you woke up one morning and decided to steal from me. That's not what happened. His shoulders dropped slightly. What happened is that you became desperate. He said nothing. You needed money. Lauren saw an asset, and instead of asking me directly, both of you allowed yourselves to imagine a future where my house solved your problem. Daniel looked at the table. Lauren interrupted. You keep saying both of us as if Daniel arranged everything. No. I turned toward her. Some things were entirely yours. I opened my purse. Lauren's face changed when I removed the envelope. I placed the printed email on the table. This, for example. Daniel looked confused. What is that? The page Lauren accidentally left in my printer. Lauren went pale. I slid it toward Daniel. He read. His eyes moved slowly down the page, then stopped. Increasingly forgetful, Lauren immediately said Daniel. He held up a hand. You told them my mother was increasingly forgetful. I described things we've discussed. We never agreed Mom was cognitively declining. I didn't say cognitively declining. You told a senior living salesperson she was increasingly forgetful. She was forgetting things. So do I. His voice rose. Jonathan said quietly, Let's keep this productive. Daniel pushed the page away. What else? I opened my black notebook. Lauren stared at it. I read several entries. The reading glasses, the restaurant name, the groceries, the medication question, the utility account suggestion, the brochure. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Then I placed the home sale calculations beside the email. Finally, I said, and Evan Mitchell. Daniel turned toward Lauren. Tell me the truth. Did you contact him? Lauren looked cornered. I asked for information. You told me you were looking at comparable sales online. I did. Did you contact him? Yes. Daniel stood. Why? Because we needed an accurate estimate. We didn't own the property. I know that now. You knew it then. I knew your mother owned it. Jonathan corrected her. The trust owns it. Lauren snapped fine. I didn't know that detail. That detail, I said quietly, is exactly why you had no business researching a sale. Lauren looked at me. Her composure finally broke. What was I supposed to do? The question stunned everyone. She stood. We were watching everything collapse. Daniel stared at her. Our savings were disappearing. Brian and Kelly wanted out. The bank wanted more equity. Every month there was another bill. Her eyes filled with tears. And Teresa was sitting in $1 million house she didn't need. There it was. Not concern. Not safety. Need. I stood slowly. You don't get to decide what I need. Lauren wiped her face angrily. 4 bedrooms for one person. My bedrooms are not your financial emergency. You could live comfortably somewhere smaller. I could. And Daniel could avoid losing everything. He could. Then why wouldn't you help? The room went silent. Because now we had reached the moral argument beneath every spreadsheet. If I could rescue my child, shouldn't I? I looked at Daniel. He looked ashamed. Then I looked at Lauren. Because helping someone and absorbing the consequences of their decisions are not always the same thing. William's lesson. Finally, I understood it. Lauren shook her head. That sounds very convenient when you're the one with money. And your argument sounds convenient when it's someone else's. Daniel whispered, Stop. Lauren turned. What stop? She stared at him. Daniel's voice shook. You went too far. Her face hardened. Don't do this. You contacted a realtor. For us. You told strangers my mother was losing her memory. I was trying to create options. You were trying to make the option you wanted look necessary. Lauren looked as though he had slapped her. I watched my son. For the first time since this began, Daniel was seeing the plan from outside his desperation. But I wasn't going to let him make Lauren the sole villain. Daniel. He looked at me. You don't get to put all of this on your wife. His expression fell. You knew she was estimating my house. Yes. You knew she was researching senior living. Yes. You hoped I would sell. He swallowed. Yes. And you hoped I would give you money. Yes. The honesty hurt. But it also cleared the air. I closed my notebook. Lauren sat down again. Jonathan folded his hands. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel asked the question I had known was coming. So what happens now? I looked at Jonathan. He gave me a slight nod. The decision was mine. Not his. Not William's. Mine. I am not selling my house. Daniel nodded. I understand. I am not paying off your investment. He closed his eyes briefly. All right. Lauren stared straight ahead. And I am not going to pretend nothing happened. Daniel looked at me. Are you cutting me out? There was fear in his voice. Not just about money. At least I hoped not. I thought about the answer carefully. No. His shoulders loosened. Not today. They tightened again. Lauren looked at me. What does that mean? It means I've spent months being told everyone else was planning responsibly for my future. I placed my hand on the trust. Now I'm going to plan for it myself. Daniel's eyes searched mine. What are you going to do? I gathered the email notebook and spreadsheets. I've already made a decision about the house. Lauren leaned forward. What decision? I looked at her. The first one is simple. I stood. I'm going home. Daniel looked confused. I continued. And tomorrow, Jonathan and I are going to begin making sure no one ever mistakes my home, my savings, or my eventual death for their financial plan again. For months, Lauren had been calculating how much money might remain after I was gone. Now she finally understood the part her spreadsheets had missed. I was still here, and I still had the authority to decide what happened next. The next morning I woke before sunrise. For the first time in months, I didn't reach for my phone to see whether Daniel had called. I didn't wonder what Lauren was saying about me. I didn't replay the nursing home tour or the meeting in Jonathan's office. I simply lay there listening to the house, the refrigerator humming downstairs, a branch brushing lightly against the bedroom window, the old heating vent clicking as the system came on. Sounds I had heard for decades. My sounds. My home. When I walked downstairs, the first light of morning was beginning to fill the kitchen. William's coffee mug was still in the cabinet. I hadn't used it since he died. That morning I took it down. I made coffee and carried the mug to the table. I'm finally listening, I whispered. At 10, I was back in Jonathan's office. This time there were no spreadsheets from Lauren, no arguments, no Daniel, just Jonathan, me, and the documents William and I had created years earlier. Jonathan opened his legal pad. Before we change anything, tell me what you want. I want to stay in my house. Good. That's easy. For as long as it's safe and practical. Even better. I smiled. I don't want this to become some foolish declaration that I'll die in that house no matter what. Jonathan nodded. That distinction matters. I may want something smaller someday. I may need help someday. I might even choose a place like the one Lauren took me to. But I choose. Jonathan wrote something down. That should be the principle behind everything we do. Then we discuss the estate, not emotionally, not as punishment, as planning. That mattered to me. I did not want to wake up furious, erase Daniel from every document, and spend the rest of my life pretending revenge was wisdom. He was still my son. I still loved him. But love could no longer mean giving him unrestricted access to the consequences of my death. I don't want to disinherit Daniel, I said. Jonathan nodded. I didn't expect you would. But I don't want him assuming the house is his. We can address that. And I don't want any specific amount becoming something he plans around. Jonathan leaned back. Then we create uncertainty where certainty has become unhealthy. That sounded harsh. Yet it also sounded right. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing what the trust allowed me to do. Some assets and distributions were governed differently from others. Jonathan explained each distinction until I understood it. This time I listened. Really listened. William would have been proud. Under the permitted authority, I decided that a meaningful portion of what might eventually remain would no longer flow through the assumptions Daniel had apparently been carrying. Part would be directed toward education. I didn't have grandchildren yet, but if Daniel ever had children, I wanted money available for schooling in a structure they could not casually drain. An education fund, Jonathan asked. Yes. Specific beneficiaries can be addressed if and when they exist. Good. Then I thought about the literacy program. Twice a week I sat across from adults who had spent years hiding the fact that reading was difficult for them. Some wanted better jobs. Some wanted to read to their grandchildren. Some simply wanted to fill out forms without asking for help. That work had given me purpose after William died. I want part of the estate to support the literacy organization. Jonathan looked up. How much I gave him a percentage? His eyebrows rose slightly. That's meaningful. So is the work. He nodded and wrote it down. What about Daniel? I looked toward the window. He can still receive something. Under what conditions I don't want to control him from the grave. Jonathan smiled faintly. Good. But I want distribution structured carefully. No assumption that a house account or specific amount automatically becomes his. We can work within the trust terms to make that clearer. I thought about Lauren. Can she control anything? Not unless you give her authority. I won't. Then she doesn't. The answer gave me more relief than I expected. We also reviewed my power of attorney, medical directives, emergency contacts, and backup decision makers. Daniel had previously occupied a central position in some of those plans. I didn't remove him from my life, but I added safeguards. Jonathan would remain involved in financial matters if questions arose. Maggie agreed to serve as a trusted backup contact for certain personal decisions. I created written instructions regarding future care. Not because Lauren was right about my incapacity, because she was wrong about who got to decide. If I become unable to live alone someday, I told Jonathan I want options evaluated based on what I need then, not based on what somebody else needs from my property. He wrote that down. And while you remain capable, no one makes the decision for me. Jonathan nodded. Clear. By the time we finished, I was exhausted. But it was a different kind of exhaustion. For months I had been defending myself against a future someone else imagined. Now I had created my own. When I returned home, Daniel's truck was parked across the street. He was sitting inside. He got out when he saw me. Can we talk? I considered saying no. Then I opened the front door. Come in. We sat in the living room. Daniel looked around as though he were seeing the house differently. Maybe he was. Did you change everything? He asked. I didn't like the question. He noticed. That's not why I came. Then why ask first? He rubbed his hands together. Because I'm scared. Of losing money. Of losing you. That softened me. Not enough to erase what happened. Enough to listen. I haven't cut you out of my life. What about the trust? The trust has changed in ways Jonathan and I believe are appropriate. Daniel swallowed. Am I still in it? Yes. Relief crossed his face. I held up a hand. But if that answer makes you feel financially safer, we still have a problem. His expression changed. I understand. Do you? I think I'm starting to. I told him about the education planning, the literacy organization, controlled future distributions. I did not give him exact numbers. That was deliberate. When I finished, Daniel stared at the floor. Lauren is going to think you're punishing us. This isn't Lauren's estate. I know. And what do you think? I took a long time. I think Dad would probably say I earned this. Your father wouldn't enjoy seeing you hurt. I know. He would want you to learn. Daniel nodded. So do I. I looked at him carefully. Then solve your investment problem. His jaw tightened. We may lose most of what we put into it. I know. We may have to sell. I know. You could prevent that. There it was, the old reflex, his and mine. For a second I almost asked how much he needed. Almost. Then I saw William at the kitchen table in my memory. Let consequences teach what rescue cannot. I could, I said. Daniel looked up. But I won't. His face fell. I continued before guilt could take over. Your emergency does not create an obligation for me to sacrifice my security. I'm your son. Yes. I thought family helped family. We do. Then what's the difference? The difference is whether help makes you stronger or simply prevents you from feeling the consequences of your choices. He stared at me. I could tell he hated the answer. I also knew he understood it. Then the front door opened without warning. Lauren stepped inside. She must have seen Daniel's truck. Her eyes moved between us. So this is happening without me. Now I stood. You don't live here, Lauren. You knock. She froze. It was a small boundary, but an important one. She stepped back and knocked once against the open door. May I come in? Yes. She entered. Daniel stood. Lauren, please. No. I want to know what she's decided. I looked at her. I am keeping my home. Her lips tightened. And I have updated my estate planning. What does that mean? It means my estate reflects my priorities. What about Daniel? He remains part of my plans. Lauren looked relieved for half a second, but not in the way either of you assumed. Her relief disappeared. I explained only the broad structure. When I mentioned the literacy organization, Lauren stared at me. You're giving money away while your own son is facing financial ruin, Daniel said quietly. Lauren, no. I want her to answer. I did. Eventually supporting literacy does not cause your current financial problem. You could solve it. Yes. That answer shocked her. I continued. I could also buy you a new house. I could buy Daniel another truck. I could pay your bills for years. The fact that I can do something doesn't mean I should. So you're teaching us a lesson, no? I shook my head. Life is doing that. I'm simply refusing to interrupt it. Lauren looked furious. This is punishment. No. Punishment would be making decisions for the purpose of hurting you. I stepped closer. This is protection. She had no answer. After they left, I locked the door. Then I checked it once, only once, and laughed. I walked through the living room into the kitchen. The house felt different, not larger, not emptier, safer. For months, Lauren had treated it as an asset waiting to be released. Daniel had treated it as an inheritance waiting to arrive. That evening, I understood what it actually was: my home. And whether I lived there for one more year or 20, whether I eventually sold it or chose senior living on my own, no one else would turn it into a countdown again. The next decision belonged to Daniel. Not about money, about me. He could resent the boundaries, or he could rebuild the relationship without expecting anything in return. For the first time in his life, I wasn't going to make that choice easier for him. I was going to watch what he did. For the first 3 weeks after I changed my estate plan, Daniel barely called. I told myself that was fine. Then I checked my phone more often than I wanted to admit. Boundaries can make you feel strong in the moment you establish them. Living with what comes afterward is harder. I missed my son. That did not mean I regretted what I had done. Both things could be true. Lauren, on the other hand, made her feelings clear. She sent one message 5 days after our conversation. I hope someday you understand how badly Daniel needed you. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down without answering. The old Teresa would have responded immediately. She would have explained, defended, softened, probably apologized for something that wasn't hers to apologize for. Instead, I went to the literacy program. That morning, I worked with a 58-year-old woman named Denise, who wanted to improve her reading because her granddaughter had started bringing books home from kindergarten. When Denise successfully read an entire page without help, she covered her mouth and laughed. I did it. Yes, you did. Driving home afterward, I thought about the money I had decided would someday support that program. For the first time, I felt no guilt. Then Daniel and Lauren's investment finally reached the point where planning could no longer save it. Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening. Brian and Kelly are done. What does that mean? They're taking the loss. And we probably are too. His voice sounded tired, not panicked. That difference mattered. I'm sorry. We're meeting with someone tomorrow about selling our interest. I waited. He didn't ask for money. How much will you lose enough to hurt? Will you lose your home? No. Will you be able to pay your bills? Yes. Then you'll survive. I was quiet. Finally, he said, "That's what Dad would have said. Probably with fewer words." Daniel laughed softly. It was the first time we'd laughed together since the nursing home tour. 2 weeks later, the deal was done. Daniel and Lauren lost a substantial portion of their investment. They did not go bankrupt. They did not become homeless. The catastrophe Lauren had imagined turned out to be painful rather than fatal. They canceled a vacation they had planned. Lauren sold a luxury SUV and replaced it with something less expensive. Daniel postponed buying a new truck. They cut spending. They began rebuilding their savings. In other words, they experienced consequences. I hated seeing Daniel hurt. But something unexpected happened. He survived. William had been right. Pain was not always disaster. Sometimes pain was information. Lauren did not see it that way. According to Daniel, she remained furious with me. I learned the details several months later when he finally told me about the argument that changed something between them. They had been sitting at their kitchen table reviewing expenses. Lauren apparently said, "None of this had to happen." Daniel asked what she meant. She said, "Your mother could have fixed it with one check." Daniel reminded her that the money belonged to me. Lauren replied, "Eventually it would have been yours." The same sentence, the same assumption. But this time Daniel heard it from the outside. He told me he stared at her for several seconds before saying, "That's exactly what Dad warned me about." Lauren became angry. She accused him of taking my side. Daniel said there should never have been sides. Then Lauren said something about how unreasonable it was for me to sit in $1 million property while they struggled. Daniel stood. "My mother is not our retirement account." When he told me those words, I had to look away. Not because they erased what he had done, they didn't, but because they sounded like growth. Their marriage became strained after that. I did not celebrate it. I did not want Daniel divorced. I didn't want Lauren miserable. I wanted them responsible. There is a difference. Daniel started calling more often. At first, I was suspicious of every call. I hated that. "Hi, Mom." "Hi. How are you?" "Fine." Pause. I would wait for the request. None came. Another week. "Want me to stop by Saturday?" "Want to see you. Do you need something?" Silence. Then Daniel said, "Mom, I know I earned that question, but it still hurts." I closed my eyes. "You're right. I don't need anything." "All right. Can I come?" "Yes." He arrived Saturday morning carrying nothing but coffee. He did not inspect the roof. He did not ask about maintenance. He did not suggest cameras, fall detectors, smaller houses, or financial access. We sat on the back porch. For nearly an hour, we talked about ordinary things: work, baseball, a neighbor, Maggie's upcoming birthday. Then Daniel noticed a loose board on the porch railing. "I can fix that." My body tightened automatically. He saw it. "Only if you want me to." That sentence mattered more than the repair. "Yes," I said. "I'd appreciate it." He fixed the board. Then he went home. No money, no trust, no inheritance. A month later, he returned. This time he asked if I wanted help moving several storage boxes. I said no. He said okay. And that was it. He did not insist that refusing help proved stubbornness. He accepted the answer. Slowly, I began understanding what rebuilding trust actually looked like. It wasn't one grand apology. It was dozens of small moments where Daniel had the opportunity to fall into an old pattern and chose differently. Eventually, he asked if we could talk seriously. We sat in my living room. He looked nervous. "I owe you an apology that isn't about Lauren." I said nothing. He continued. "I've spent months telling myself I didn't know how far she was going. You didn't." "No. But I knew enough. I waited. I knew she was researching your house. I knew she was looking at senior living. I knew she thought you might help us if you sold." "Yes." And I let her keep going because part of me wanted it to work. The honesty hurt. But it was clean pain. No excuses. "I was scared," he said. "And I turned you into a solution." My eyes filled. Daniel's did too. I never wanted you gone. I know. I need you to believe that. I do. He leaned forward. But I did think of the house as mine someday. Yes. And when I think about that now, I feel sick. I reached across and took his hand. For the first time since the lawyer's office, I touched him without feeling guarded. Your father worried about that kind of thinking. I know. He also loved you. Daniel nodded. I know that too. You made a mistake. A big one. Yes. He almost smiled. Thanks. You wanted honesty. I did. I squeezed his hand. I forgive you. Daniel closed his eyes. I felt his fingers tighten around mine. Then I added, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'm changing the trust back. He opened his eyes. I know. And it doesn't mean everything immediately goes back to normal. I know. I need time. I know. 3 identical answers. No argument. No negotiation. That told me more than any apology. Lauren's apology had not come. Not yet. She remained distant. When I saw her at family gatherings, she was polite. So was I. I did not punish her with cruelty. I also did not invite her back into my financial life. Some doors could remain closed without hatred standing behind them. Several months after the nursing home tour, Daniel called on a Wednesday afternoon. Are you free Friday for what lunch? I waited. What's this about? He laughed softly. Food. Daniel. Mom. I'm asking my mother to lunch. No investment discussion. No. No estate questions. No. No surprise tours. There was a pause. Then he said, I deserve that. Yes, you did. He laughed. So lunch, I smiled. All right. Friday we met at a small restaurant near my old school. Daniel was already seated when I arrived. No folders, no spreadsheets, no worried expression. Just my son. We ordered sandwiches. He told me about a new employee at work. I told him Maggie had convinced me to try a beginner yoga class. He nearly choked laughing. For an hour we talked. When the check arrived, Daniel grabbed it. I've got this. I raised an eyebrow. Can you afford it? He stared at me. Then we both laughed. Really laughed. Walking to my car afterward, I realized something. I had spent months wondering whether I could forgive Daniel, but forgiveness had never been the hardest part. The hardest part was accepting that forgiveness could not mean returning to the relationship we had before. That relationship had allowed too much rescuing, too many assumptions, too little honesty. What we were building now was different, maybe smaller, maybe slower, but more truthful. As I reached my car, Daniel called after me. Mom, I turned. I love you. I love you too. He didn't add anything. He didn't need to. And for the first time in a long time, those words didn't feel connected to what I owned, what I might give him, or what would happen when I was gone. They were simply about the fact that I was still here. And finally, my son was learning how to value that. A year after Lauren drove me into that senior living community, I stood at the bottom of my staircase, holding a contractor's estimate. The irony was not lost on me. The estimate covered a second handrail, brighter hallway lighting, non-slip flooring in the upstairs bathroom, and several smaller changes that would make the house easier to manage as I got older. Maggie stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. Well, she said apparently, Lauren was right about one thing. I looked at her. Choose your next words carefully. She smiled. Stairs exist. I laughed. That was the difference a year had made. I could talk about aging without feeling threatened by it. I could admit that my knees hurt some mornings. I could acknowledge that the house required work. I could prepare for the possibility that someday I might not want 4 bedrooms, a large yard, and a staircase. None of those admissions made me incapable. They made me practical. The contractor completed the changes that summer. I also hired someone to handle more of the yard work. Not because Lauren had told me to, because I had decided there were better ways to spend a Saturday than arguing with weeds. I updated my emergency contacts. I reviewed my medical directive again with Jonathan. Maggie remained one of my backup contacts, and Daniel had a clearly defined role too. The difference was that everyone now knew where the boundaries were. Daniel never complained about them. That mattered. Our relationship had continued healing in small ways. He called once or twice a week. Sometimes he came for dinner. Sometimes I went to his house. He still offered to help with things, but he had learned to ask. More importantly, he had learned to hear no. One Saturday he came over while I was reorganizing the garage. "You want help?" "No." He looked at the boxes stacked behind me. "You sure?" "Yes." "All right." He went inside and made coffee. 10 minutes later I walked into the kitchen. I changed my mind. He smiled. "Smart woman. Don't ruin the moment." We spent the afternoon sorting boxes. That was how trust returned. Not through declarations, through ordinary moments that stayed ordinary. Daniel never asked about the trust again. Not once. I noticed. He never asked how much the house was worth. He never asked what percentage might eventually go to him. He never complained about the literacy organization. His investment loss had changed him. He became more cautious with money. He rebuilt savings slowly. When a friend invited him into another property deal, he declined. "How do you know?" Maggie asked when I told her. "Daniel told me." "What did he say?" "That if an investment only works when everything goes right, it doesn't work." Maggie smiled. "William would approve." "Yes. I thought he would too." Lauren was different. For months she and I remained polite but distant. There were no dramatic confrontations, no screaming, no family exile. I simply stopped giving her access to parts of my life she had once treated as information she was entitled to possess. She did not know my account balances. She did not know the details of the trust. She did not know what my house might someday be sold for. When she asked how I was doing, I answered honestly. When she asked about my finances, which happened only once, I said they're handled. She never asked again. Then one Sunday afternoon, Lauren called. "Could I come over?" I hesitated. "Is Daniel with you?" "No." That made me more cautious, not less. "What do you want to discuss?" "You." I almost laughed. "That hasn't always gone well." "I know." Something in her voice made me say yes. She arrived half an hour later. For the first time I could remember, she looked nervous entering my house. She stopped at the front door and knocked. I noticed. "Come in." We sat in the living room. Lauren held her purse with both hands. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she looked at me. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I've apologized in my head about 50 different ways." "That sounds exhausting." She smiled weakly. "It is." Then her eyes filled. I was terrified. About the investment, about everything. She explained that as the losses grew, she began waking at night calculating bills. She imagined losing their savings, their lifestyle, their home, their marriage. Every problem became a number. Then she looked at my house and saw another number. "I convinced myself I was being practical," she said. "I know. No, I don't think you do." She wiped beneath one eye. "I needed to believe I was helping you, because the alternative was admitting I was trying to solve my fear with something that belonged to you." That was the first time Lauren had described what happened without defending it. She continued. "When you forgot your glasses, I noticed. I said nothing. When you forgot the restaurant name, I noticed that too. Every ordinary thing became evidence because I wanted evidence." Maggie's words returned to me. "Selective information can create a story." "I told myself you would be happier somewhere easier," Lauren said. "Maybe you would have been. But that wasn't my decision." "No. And contacting Evan was wrong." "Yes. Telling Rebecca you were increasingly forgetful was worse." "Yes." She looked down. "I'm sorry. I believed her. That didn't erase anything. But I believed her." "I forgive you, Lauren." She looked up. Relief crossed her face. Then I continued. "But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to how things were." Her expression became cautious. "I understand. You won't be involved in my financial decisions." "I know. You won't have access to the details of my estate." "All right. And if I ever move, it will be because I choose to." She nodded. "I understand." This time I thought she actually did. Several months later, Maggie called me with an idea. "There's an open house Saturday." "For what?" "A retirement community." I nearly dropped the phone laughing. "You have a death wish. Listen first." "I'm listening." "A woman from my book club moved there. She loves it. I thought we could look around." "Why?" Because we're almost 70, Teresa. Speak for yourself. You turn 70 in 4 months. Details. Maggie laughed. I'm not suggesting we move tomorrow. I'm curious. And to my surprise, so was I. Saturday morning I drove. That mattered to me. We arrived at a community about 30 minutes away. It had cottages, apartments, gardens, a pool, a library, and a dining room that smelled better than expected. A woman named Susan showed us around. At one point she asked, "Are either of you planning a move soon?" Maggie looked at me. I answered, "No, we're gathering information." Susan smiled. "That's the best time to look. No transition timeline, no leather folder, no property valuation, no one speaking for me." We toured a 2-bedroom apartment. Maggie stood on the balcony. "I could live here. You say that because you haven't seen the closets. We inspected them." "Absolutely not," she announced. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Later, we drank coffee in the courtyard. I looked around at the residents. Some were walking together. One woman was reading. A man sat beneath a tree talking on his phone. Nothing about the place frightened me, and suddenly I understood why. The first senior living community had never frightened me either. What frightened me was being brought there as though my consent were an obstacle. I had confused the destination with the betrayal. Now I could separate them. Maybe someday I would sell my house. Maybe I would choose a cottage like these. Maybe I would stay where I was and bring in more help. I didn't know. And for once, not knowing felt perfectly fine. Because the future did not have to be decided before it arrived. That evening I returned home and sat on the back porch. The maple tree William planted decades earlier moved gently in the wind. I thought about him. For a long time I believed his trust had saved me. Legally, perhaps it had protected me. But documents alone weren't enough. A trust could protect property. A lawyer could explain rights. A friend could preserve evidence. None of them could speak the one word I had eventually needed to say for myself. No. No, I am not moving because you need money. No, my age does not make my decisions less important. No, my home is not your inheritance while I am still living in it. No, love does not require me to disappear so someone else can feel secure. I wasn't afraid of getting older. What frightened me was realizing how easily people could begin talking around me, planning for me, and counting what I owned while I was still sitting in the room. Growing older may eventually change the kind of home I need. It may change how I drive, travel, climb stairs, or manage my days. But aging does not make my voice smaller. And as long as my mind and my voice are mine, the choice is mine too. That was the home I had really needed all along.